IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. And that is Sean Davis. Y'all remember him. Y'all know him. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we are here ready to talk football today. Sean and I were having a conversation the other day and thought it would be a great topic to have for a podcast. And you guys know how Sean and I often do shows together. We are having conversations. And we're like, you know what, man? Let's talk to the people about this and let's kind of take this public. And I think that the conversation today, Sean, is, obviously there's a lot of frustration as you watch these playoff games. You're sitting there thinking like Notre Dame could beat that team, Notre Dame could beat that team, Notre Dame could beat that team. And we can talk all we want till we're blue in the face about how Notre Dame got screwed out of the playoffs. And while I believe that Notre Dame did get screwed out of the playoffs, the other thing we've also said is you put yourself in that situation by losing 2 football games. And as we said all offseason, all you got to do is go 1-1 coming out of the break, and you're good to go. And they weren't able to do that. So the committee has some blame, but also Notre Dame's football program has areas where they need to continue to grow. And we saw Notre Dame make a run at the title game last year and then played a game that wasn't overly competitive. And you look at teams this year, and there's a lot of questions about could they beat Indiana? Could they not beat Indiana? And there's a thread on our board. A good buddy of mine was like, I don't know that they could beat Indiana because I don't trust this offensive line right now to play at a level that could beat Indiana. We could have that debate. We don't necessarily know because they didn't play. All I know is Notre Dame is the last team to beat Indiana, but both of those teams look different. And one of the starting offensive linemen that played on that offensive line that beat Indiana last year is now starting for Indiana. And so we got to talking, and it started with being line-driven and then kind of went out kind of bigger picture. And we said, what are sort of the things that we're seeing that are themes of teams that are making runs in the playoffs, Sean? And so we really came down to like 5 things that we think are at the top of the list of if you want to win 3 to 4 games and win a championship, you've got to do these things. And so we're going to talk about those things. We're going to talk about, is Notre Dame there? Do they need to get there? And not every team has all 5 of these, but we're seeing something, or at least they're not great at all 5 of these, but there's some level of this exists. And that's what we're going to look at as you start to build this 2026 football team. If you're Marcus Freeman, and of course with the offense Mike Denbrock, with the defense Chris Ash, these are things that you need to be aware of. Are these part of our DNA as a football team? And that's what we're going to kind of get into today, Sean, is what are the themes that we've learned from last year's playoff run, but then also this year's playoff run that are starting to show what the patterns are to the teams that get into the playoffs and then make deep runs once they get there.
And as we talked about it and started to build it out, it was just kind of important, just looking at the national championship. There are many ways to do it, right? There's not just one way to, as you and Trevor did a great job talking about Notre Dame being an offensive and defensive line driven program, which Marcus Freeman said he always wanted that to be the anchor of the program. And I think they're making strides and have made strides to make sure that is what, the fruit of the program is based upon, that being the anchor of the program. But just the contrasting styles of the national championship game and how those 2 teams were able to do it in the trenches on both sides of the ball in different ways makes for what I think is a very compelling matchup, and a matchup that's going to give you different styles that I think is going to soothe both fan bases into thinking they have a chance to win that game. But when we look at it from the standpoint of Notre Dame, so many ways to look at it. How is Notre Dame going to look? What style is best going to fit them moving forward? Not just in the trenches, but even building out from that. So it's an interesting conversation that we're able to get into and kind of build out from that focal point to really see how Notre Dame is going to be able to build ultimately what Marcus Freeman's vision was since he arrived in the trenches. So it's going to be a great conversation. I can't wait to get into it.
Well, so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go 5-1. We as we talked, we came up with here's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 obviously being the most important, but we're going to kind of work in reverse order. And to start off with, Sean, and I think this is one that obviously is going to sting a little bit for Notre Dame but it really comes down to it. What we're seeing from the teams that make deep runs is you've got to have a level of fourth quarter success, fourth quarter dominance. And now sometimes that's not needed, right? Indiana didn't need that against Alabama, but they did need that against, they didn't need that against Oregon, but they did need it against Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, which set forth their run. But but even then, Indiana outscored Alabama 14-0. You look at Ohio State and Miami, it was 7-7 in the fourth quarter, but it was the fourth quarter dominance of Indiana or Miami stopping Ohio State in their attempts to come back because they had that lead. Ole Miss beats Georgia by 5. They were down 24-19 going into the fourth quarter. They outscored Georgia 20-10 in the fourth quarter. Oregon beats Texas Tech. It was 6-0 at halftime. They outscored them 17-0 in the second half, including 10 points in the fourth quarter. Miami beats Ole Miss in the semifinals by 4. They outscored Ole Miss 14-11 in the fourth quarter. And then even Indiana outscores Oregon in the fourth quarter. So, you look at it, Trev or Sean, and it's kind of the same thing. We see a lot of this. It's can you thrive in the fourth quarter? The last time that we saw a team win a playoff game where they got outscored in the fourth quarter, the interesting thing is it's Notre Dame and Ohio State last year. Both got outscored in the first 2 rounds. Notre Dame got outscored by Indiana in the fourth quarter, 14-7. And then Ohio State got outscored in the fourth quarter by Oregon, 6-0. So those are exceptions because they were blowouts where a team scored garbage points. But anytime there's been a competitive football game, it's the team that, Texas, Arizona State outscores Texas 16-7 to get it into overtime. If it's not for the fourth quarter, they're not in that football game. Notre Dame outscores Georgia 3-0 in the fourth quarter. It wasn't that they dominated points-wise in the fourth quarter. It's they kept Georgia out of the end zone and off the board in the fourth quarter. There was a level of dominance in the fourth quarter. Notre Dame outscores Penn State 24-14 in the second half, 17-14 in the fourth quarter. Ohio State and Texas, it's a 14-point game. Guess what? Ohio State outscored Texas 14-0 in the fourth quarter. And so you see this throughout. You have to be able to have success in the fourth quarter. And why was Notre Dame not in the playoffs this year? Because they couldn't make fourth quarter stops in both of their games. And in the first game, the offense also couldn't take that minute plus, the O-line falters on that final drive. If Notre Dame was a better fourth quarter team this season, they might still be playing right now.
You talk about that. I point back to the Texas A&M game the year before, right? They looked questionable in a lot of different areas. The defense played well for the majority of the game, but the offensive line struggled. They couldn't get the run game going. They got a couple of big run plays that led to points, but they had to settle for field goals when they were moving the ball. When they got turnovers and plus possession, they weren't able to convert it into points, right? They should have been further out in front, but it got down to it, and they needed that drive. When the game was tied up in the fourth quarter, and they need to come with a drive, they were able to do it, right? The offensive line was able to hunker down. They had struggled all game. They were able to hunker down, run the ball, get chunk plays in the run game, give Riley the ability to make key third downs, and then protect him on key third downs when he converts on the out route to Jaden Greathouse. So it's just moments like that that really lends to different teams year to year. And coaches tell teams and players that there is no carryover. Like this team and this season in 2026 can't depend upon 2025 for motivation. They can't depend upon 2024. They're going to have to forge their own identity, and they're going to have to find a way to be a fourth quarter team, because ultimately that's what it takes. That's the character of championship football. You have to be able to win the fourth quarter. When they go to the break at the end of the third quarter, doesn't really mean anything unless you do it, but you see both teams on the sidelines doing this, putting up the 4. Like everybody knows we have to win this quarter. It's an identity. It's what's going to cause us to be able to manifest what we believe we are as a football team. And so, with that being said, you gave the evidence that really can't be refuted. Of course, with the things you talked about with the first round games with Indiana and Ohio State as outliers. But other than that, that's going to be the challenge. One of the things I love is that the identity of Notre Dame as a team last year, as they went on to the national championship game, whether it was Georgia, where the offense struggled, but whether it was making the right special teams play, because this goes to the coaches as well, whether it's making that special teams call against Georgia, whether it's getting the ball back and saying, okay, we just need a couple of first downs. We don't have to score. If we just get a couple of first downs, we sought this game away. At Penn State, you come out, you struggle offensively in the first half. What do they come out? Whatever was said in the locker room, they come out and immediately the offensive line starts to run the ball. We're going right at you, right? They had trouble stopping that pass rusher for Penn State all game long. They couldn't stop him. But when they needed a drive, after Penn State took the lead in the fourth quarter, they found a way to protect Riley Leonard so he could hit Jay Greathouse. That's what it's about, right?
Yep.
Can you answer the bell when you need to answer the bell? And more than likely, it's going to come in the fourth quarter. That's when you have to have it. You go to the other side of the ball. Penn State pretty much in the first half had their way.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame began to bow their neck, and there in the fourth quarter, they got some key stops. They had a stop on an interception that was taken away from them, the Jack Kaiser interception. So you saw that when they needed it on both sides of the ball, they were able to get it. And that's why they ended up in the national championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the talent, the coaching, everything. When you needed it, they were able to go get it. And something you talked about that we're going to get to, when you start talking about that, it just flows into other areas. And we're going to talk about that. But that fourth quarter is because people say, hey, it's a 4-quarter game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a 4-quarter game, right? And people will tell you, they will always point to the things that happened late in the games. That's the reason we lost. They didn't call that penalty or that drop pass or that missed pass, that overthrow. Whatever it is, they focus on that. But then you forget about the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. It is truly a compilation of all 4 quarters that gives you the result. Unfortunately, that fourth quarter hits a little bit different, Brian. It just hits different when it comes to execution, focus, and toughness.
Yep.
Right? It just hits different.
Well, Notre Dame, I mean, just look at their their losses in recent seasons, right? I mean, this season, Notre Dame gets outscored by Texas A&M 10-9 in the fourth quarter. Who won that football game? It was Texas A&M by a point. You look at the Texas A&M game last year that Notre Dame won. Notre Dame outscored Texas A&M 17-7 in the second half, 10-7 in the fourth quarter. I mean, like now they did outscore Miami in the fourth quarter this year because they were down big. They needed to outscore them in the fourth quarter to even be in the game. But then once they got back in the game, they couldn't stop Miami. And then their offense couldn't put that final drive together. And then last year against Northern Illinois, Notre Dame loses by 2 points. Northern Illinois outscores them 3-0 in the fourth quarter. At 3-0 in the fourth quarter. I mean, so we've seen this with Notre Dame. Now, there's a lot of times they've won games with that. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of times. There's been a few. There actually hasn't been a lot of close Notre Dame games the last couple of years. And that's kind of where I'm coming from, because to win a title, you're usually going to need to win at least one close game. I mean, Ohio State crushed Tennessee, crushed Oregon, beat Notre Dame pretty soundly. But what was the game that was competitive? It was against Texas. And who dominated the fourth quarter? Who dominated the big moments in those games? Whereas you look at Notre Dame the last couple of years, Notre Dame hasn't really had a lot of games where it was even competitive in the fourth quarter. That doesn't mean they haven't done well there. I mean, they outscored USC 35-21 in the fourth quarter last year. It was 14-14 in the fourth quarter, tied, but USC scored last. in the fourth quarter when the game was over. They scored with 13 seconds left when the game was over. Now, Louisville outscored Notre Dame last year 10-7 in the fourth quarter, which made a game that shouldn't have been close much more competitive. Fortunately, but Notre Dame was able to make some stops down the way. So, we're already seeing it in the chat. The refs screwed us versus Texas A&M. Yeah, on that one final play, but to Sean's point, there were so many things that happened. And that let's take this into point 4, because I think they build on each other, Sean. Discipline and key moments. That's number 4. Discipline and key moments. Miami started to kind of falter late in that game against A&M. They started getting personal fouls and late hits and just some bad penalties. But then they kind of settled in and made some key plays and key moments, right? And had discipline and key moments, not turning the ball over, not turning guys loose. And in a lot of these games, the team that's been most disciplined in the key moments wins. So you talk about the A&M game where they got screwed. The reality is the game never should have come down to that moment on fourth down where Donovan Heinrich got tackled, and it should have been called. Number 1, make your extra points. Number 2, don't commit a blatant pass interference penalty on 3rd and 16 on that final drive. Don't lose contain on Marcel Reed on a scramble where he runs for a long gain. Don't not tackle a guy when you've got 3 guys on him at midfield. Don't turn guys loose in coverage. There were so many instances of a lack of discipline that resulted in that win. Ohio State 2023, back-to-back plays. You've got to lead. All you need to do is make 2 stops. And on those 2 plays where you needed those 2 stops, you had 10 guys on the field on defense. Right? So we've seen too much of this. Now, we've also seen Notre Dame start to win in these situations, Sean. Who was the more disciplined team in the fourth quarter between Notre Dame and Penn State? Coaching-wise and player-wise. Marcus Freeman didn't flinch in the fourth quarter against Penn State. James Franklin did. Marcus Freeman didn't flinch in the second half against Georgia. Georgia did. So this isn't like one of those, woe is us, Notre Dame doesn't do well. There has been a lot more success in those, but it needs to be even better in the biggest games, more consistent in the biggest games if you're going to win a title. Because as great as last year was, they didn't win a title. They fell short. And all these things factor into that. So we can point to the holding call against Donovan Heinrich, and it was a terrible non-call. I think it was a rigged situation. It's one of those, you got to let him play in this type of situation. Okay, do you think if Drake Bone would have tackled the tight end in the end zone before the ball came, they'd have said, got to let him play? No, they'd have called a pass interference penalty and should have called one. But in these situations, Sean, Notre Dame has to show more coaching and player discipline in these moments. This is an area that I think we've seen of these 5 things. This is an area where I think we've seen the most growth under Marcus Freeman in his 4 years. I'm still bothered by that 10 guys on the field from 2 years ago, but I also have a level of confidence that we're never going to see anything that egregious again, in my opinion. But that's an anomaly. That's not normally the type of fourth quarter discipline we're talking about. I do think, even though at times this year we didn't see that, I think for the most part we have seen some growth in this area, but clearly not enough for this football team to have put together a championship team. And as good as they might have been at that in October and November, they weren't good enough at that in August and September, and that's why Notre Dame is sitting at home right now.
You talk about that discipline. It's very important that we look at this from the standpoint of understanding that discipline can be layered, right? You have the pre-snap penalties, discipline, right? Then there's something that we talked about, a particular play to start the Indiana-Oregon game, right? Where we were talking about all these rumors about Indiana cheating, and we were like, no, look, this is discipline. We were literally on the phone as the play was happening and noticed, Pons did his homework. That is a very disciplined young man, very talented, has the gifts and ability to be recognized as a possible late first round, second round pick. But more than that, you can tell he's studied, he's learned, he's disciplined, he understands the moment. It's early in the game. They're not probably going to take a shot. They're probably trying to get 5, 6, 7 yards and get their quarterback into the game. I'm going to sit on this route. This is the opportunity that I know this formation to the field or to the boundary, they're going to take free access. I'm off the ball. They're anticipating I'm going to backpedal. I'm not. I'm going to sit. I'm going to jump the route. And if it comes the way I think it comes, I'm going to pick it and take it back. That's a form of discipline. That's not just doesn't begin on the day of the game. That's all year preparing. That's remembering the first matchup and what they did and carrying it over. So that as well, studying and all of that, that starts now. That starts now in off-season workouts. Those defensive backs being with Coach Mickens, looking at what the teams are going to be facing, what they like to do, working on what their weaknesses have been, and how teams went at them individually and collectively. All of that leads to the discipline that leads to being prepared for those moments and those big moments in the fourth quarter. So, like I said, is that moment like that, and then you have the pre-snap penalties. You talked about Miami. Miami had been much better. They had a dip in the middle of the season where they got a little raggedy and sloppy. They cleaned it up, right? And so we keep waiting for the sloppy side of Carson Beck. It hasn't come yet. He's been very disciplined. He's been able to work within the construct of the offense and do what they asked him to do as the season went along, being more disciplined with taking opportunities with his legs because they've been there. He had not done that. Later in the season, he started to do that. And you see how beneficial it's been for them to extend drives in the college football playoff. When you talk about discipline, man, it's just really so layered, but it always goes back to the point of doing what needs to be done in the moment. That's what discipline, it prepares you to be able to execute what needs to be done, whether it's in the structure or outside of the structure of what's being asked. You get the job done. And I think Notre Dame, we saw that in a lot of different ways with the 24 season that we didn't see in the 25 season on both sides of the ball. So I think that's something they need to get back to. And it starts right now. It really does. Like the more we sit, even now, strength and conditioning, that's a discipline. What's needed for me to get better? Do I need to drop weight? Do I need to gain muscle, gain weight? Like, what is coach telling me? Coach Freeman and the other staff, what are they talking to about the strength and conditioning? What are their thoughts? How do I feel about that? Right? There are conversations. Do I need to move inside on the defensive line? If I stay outside, what's going to be best for me to stay outside? Do I need on the back end? Do I need to move to this position? Is this going to make us a better defense? All of these conversations are taking place. And it's going to take a disciplined team to be able to, number one, do what's best for the collective, then do what's best for you individually, and then stick to the plan and just work it and build that brotherhood and build the 26 version of Notre Dame without even thinking about, like, we understand what we've seen on Here Come the Irish. We understand what's been reported. It's only so far you can carry, remember the pain. Like, yeah, remember the pain, but when it's time to kick off week one, that pain has to be disciplined because you can't turn it into anger and just play wild, undisciplined football.
Right.
You have to funnel it into discipline to drive you to do things the right way on a consistent basis. And so that's what I'm looking forward to this team being able to display.
Sean, I think discipline is key. I think discipline is something that has to be established in January. It has to be established in how the accountability you hold players to in the classroom and the weight room and how they conduct themselves, all those type of things. And I do think that's something that Marcus Freeman has tried to do during his tenure. And that's why, I mean, we don't see Notre Dame players, knock on wood, getting in trouble and and creating problems in the community. And look, there were times when Notre Dame didn't have players in trouble that people in the community say, yeah, they're not getting caught with this, but man, this is going on and that's going on and that's going on. And I haven't really heard that in the last couple of years. And like I heard, the last time I heard that was probably Freeman's first year and a half. And that was a carryover of the culture that had been established previously where that stuff was allowed to be more prominent. And, you know, I just think at a place like Notre Dame, you can't turn that discipline switch on and off. And that's going to be a key. And discipline sometimes isn't don't commit a bad penalty. Discipline a lot of times is being disciplined, meaning in the fourth quarter, I've got to really be locked into what I'm supposed to do. I got to be really locked into my assignments. I got to be really locked in to make sure I'm hitting the right gap. I got to really be locked into making sure my footwork on 3rd and 1 is what it needs to be. I need to be really disciplined and making sure I'm making the proper fourth quarter, pre-snap read, and I'm running the proper distance on my route, not breaking it off short, which allows the cornerback to drive on my route. Those levels of discipline, that when we think discipline, we think a lot of things that you and I have already talked about. Don't commit dumb penalties, don't turn the ball over, make sure you got 11 guys on the field. But discipline also comes down to doing your job a proper way. Discipline isn't always about you're right or you're wrong. Discipline is about being disciplined. You know, it's about, look, if I say, look, it's important for me to have a clean desk in my office. If I'm not doing that, I'm not being disciplined. I'm not committing egregious errors and sins and things like that, but I'm not being disciplined with the details of how I go about doing my job. And same thing in football. Discipline is also how you play from a high level of technical prowess, of assignment prowess. And, you know, when I talk about the Alabama defensive lineman that Notre Dame was recruiting, James Smith, one of my biggest issues with breaking down his film was an utter lack of discipline. I don't mean he was getting 15 late hit penalties or he wasn't getting 9 off start, fall off sides. He wasn't, hitting guys in the face. It was, dude, it was so clear you were supposed to be an A gap there and you went to the B gap. It was so obvious that you were supposed to loop around, but instead you slanted and ran right into your guy, and you could just watch that whole D line and see an utter lack of discipline, which is why a unit with so much talent underachieved so much of the year. And so discipline is also how you do your job. And I think that is an area where I think we've seen the most growth from Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman. It's not perfect. Nobody is, but that's an area we've seen growth. But I think I'll point to the 2 losses this year, the lack of, Sean, I remember when I first started breaking down the Ohio State game last year, and I kept sending you clips of plays in the first and second quarter from the offense, and I'm just like disgusted, like, oh my God, how do you make this? This is even about Ohio State. Like, this should be a 75-yard touchdown run for Jadarian Price if this one guy does his job, or these 2 guys just do your job, not even be Hercules and drive a guy. Hey, if they would have just driven that guy 5 yards off the ball, they might have had something there. Well, duh. I'm talking about, bro, it's there. One guy doesn't do his job here. One guy doesn't do his job there in those big games. And yeah, you did it against Penn State for most of the game, but then you didn't do it in the final game. And I think those are things that this team still has another level they get to. And when we're having these conversations, Sean, saying Notre Dame isn't where they need to be doesn't mean they suck at it. It doesn't mean they're bad at it. It doesn't mean what a terrible job this coaching staff has had. It's the difference between being a good team, a really good team, and a championship team. And the higher level of discipline you play from a penalty standpoint, a turnover standpoint, and then just a discipline of playing the game the way you're taught to play from a technical and assignment standpoint is all part of Notre Dame right now. The last 2 years has been a really good football team. Have they been a championship football team? Clearly not. And that's where it's like, okay, so you maybe they were here when he took over, and then they've slowly grown to here. I think it's fair, but now they got to get to here to win it all. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I want to say something that taps into what you just talked about. And I never thought about until I had a conversation with Malik and he mentioned it. He was like, bro, you don't understand. He's like, people are making all of these excuses about the age of Indiana. He was like, make no mistake, the defense for Notre Dame was good last year because the two dudes that were the captains had played a lot of football. He was like, so he was like, if you've played a lot of football, more than likely you're going to have a greater understanding and you're going to receive information and instruction and be able to process it a whole lot better than somebody that's younger and is still having to grow and experience the game. He was like, it makes a difference. He was like, so it's not that Notre Dame wasn't particularly as talented,
right,
and prepared for those moments talent-wise. He was like, but when you have guys like Jack Kaiser and Xavier Watson there, that
fifth and a sixth-year senior. Howard Cross is a sixth-year senior.
Absolutely.
Riley Mills was a fifth-year senior. RJ Oben was a sixth-year senior.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they had some young guys, more than what Indiana has. But I'm kind of tired of hearing that about Indiana. Oh, well, they're just older and they're playing against boys. And I'm like, those teams they played against had plenty of older guys. Yeah. What are you talking about here?
Yeah.
And we're not talking about like
from
it's excuse making. Right.
It's two-way, right? The instruction has to be really good. That means the coaches have to instruct it really good. And then, they have to understand my instruction probably has to be a little bit more piercing because I don't have guys out there that can be an extension of me to make sure these guys are where they need to be pre-snap. You already know they're going to have guys where they need to be and have them knowing what they need to do at every moment, especially at the biggest moments. And so that is something, especially when you looked at the early struggles on the defensive side of the ball from assignment standpoint. It's like, okay, what was going on here? Did something get dropped from the instruction standpoint? Or was it just growing pains of younger guys being in there and not being used to having to do what you had two guys that had played a lot of football the previous 2 seasons? They were used to doing that and felt very comfortable. So therefore, your defense was very comfortable in those situations as well. So, but I think the experience now is on those young men, the side of a Drake Bowen. Now, even more experience, the side of the
with experience, what comes with experience? Technical,
yes,
and assignment prowess, discipline. Efficiency.
Yep.
Right. Like, and part of discipline comes from leadership from a player standpoint, but discipline is one of those things that's primarily, when I talk about the technical and assignment prowess, like how guys act in the locker room, away from the field. That to me is more about player leadership. I'm not worried about coach seeing me acting a fool in the classroom. I'm worried about one of the captains or one of my teammates seeing me acting a fool and then having to deal with that in the locker room. But you look at a guy like Pat Coogan, for example, and the player he was at Notre Dame, who we loved, great, hard-nosed warrior, blah, 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 blah. He plays with such better technical and assignment discipline this season. And I'm to believe that that's just the normal maturation from senior to fifth-year senior. Going from 22 years old to 23 years old, even though he's learning a brand new system, is just why he miraculously is such a better player now than he was at Notre Dame. Or maybe that's coming from elite coaching. I'm not trying to take a shot at the Notre Dame offensive line coach as much as I'm praising the job of the Indiana offensive line coach. And that's the thing I'll continue to point to is great coaching is a big part of why you see the success that Notre Dame has had this year. I mean, little things. I'm just looking at his Pro Football Focus numbers. He's played 139 more snaps this year than he played last year. He has not given up a single sack or a single hit on the quarterback. Last year, he gave up 3. He's played 139 more snaps this season, and he's only allowed 1 more pressure this year. Last year, in 139 fewer snaps, he committed twice as many penalties as he did at Notre Dame. In 2023, he played about almost 200 fewer snaps, gave up 8 hits plus sacks on the quarterback, and committed 3 penalties. So, yes, maturation is part of this, experience is part of this, but also you look at it and say there's a reason why these players are performing at such a higher level than they did before. And it comes down to, great discipline. And he's not the only one. Rocco Spindler last year at Notre Dame gave up 10 pressures, including 4 hits in the quarterback. This year at Nebraska, he gave up, pass blocks. He only played 30 fewer pass snaps this year at Nebraska than he did at Notre Dame last year, and he had half of the sacks. He had half of the pressures allowed. He gave up 1 sack, 0 hits this year. Last year, he gave up 4 hits. Last year, he committed 2 penalties as a starter. The year before that, he committed 2 penalties as a starter. This year at Nebraska, he committed 0. So, again, you've got to look at those things. And so, and that's an area where, again, I think Notre Dame has to consider, like, look, are we where we need to be from how we're teaching these guys at various positions to get them to play with greater discipline? And you look at how the secondary played in the first couple games of the year, no discipline. And then you look at how they played later in the year, it was a lot better. Still not where it needs to be. And that's something that I think Chris Ash really needs to figure out, because that was not a problem for the defensive secondary the 2 previous seasons. So I think it's about fixing those things and saying, well, you can accuse them of cheating and being too old or whatever else, but here's what I know at the end of the day, they play with great discipline. And Notre Dame will not be able to use that, well, but we're really young card next year, because they will not be a young football team next year. They will be a very veteran, experienced football team next year. And hopefully from that comes even greater discipline. Remember when Jalen Sneed got that really bad personal foul against Boston College? And I was really upset about it. And I started thinking, when was the last time Notre Dame had a really bad, dumb personal foul? It doesn't happen often. I think you'd have to probably go back to Sam Pendleton had one after a PAT in the playoffs against Indiana.
Name the things we used to see all the time.
Always
bad personal fouls, delay of games out of timeouts.
Yes.
All of these
year, I think,
undisciplined things we would see littered throughout the season. Now they've been minimized.
Right.
And he's learned, because you saw certain things, different things that were part of being undisciplined early in his tenure as a head coach. But we can just surmise it like this, okay? Because this is what you're going to see on Monday night. You're going to see 2 teams that force you to beat them. Mm-hmm. We're not about to give you the game. We saw
I can't believe we're saying that about Miami.
Miami has shown that still is part of them. Some residue is still there, because we saw it against Louisville and SMU. When they do become unraveled.
And for a minute there against
Ole Miss as well.
Ole Miss, yeah.
Which kept Ole Miss in the game, and they almost lost it. But what you really see for the most part are 2 teams that know who they are, they stick to the script, and they're going to force you to beat them. They're not about to give the game to you. You're going to have to play. You talked about, look, I saw some tape on Pat Coogan. The only time that he struggled was in the Big Ten championship game. You know why? Not from technique. The dude he was going up against is a first-round pick, a really big dude and really good. And when it's good on good, guess what? You're going to lose some of those battles. It's just it. He had the right technique. That dude was just strong. And his technique just couldn't work against that strength on that snap. And that's what you want as a football team. That's when you give yourself the best chance to win. That was really the strength of the New England Patriots for a long time. As long as we are disciplined and do everything that falls under the construct of that discipline, from preparation all to the clock striking 00, we're going to win this game, because most teams in the NFL or most teams in college football will give you the game. They will give you the game, most teams. But when you go up against other good teams that also are anchored in discipline, all right, now who's going to win that fourth quarter? Because they're the more disciplined team. And I think to think about it, if there is a close game in the fourth quarter Monday night, we were both sitting here today, we would both say we probably trust one team and one coaching staff and one quarterback more than the other.
Right.
just based upon what we've seen. So,
and that leads to kind of point 3. And I will say one thing about that, Sean, is I do wonder how Indiana's lack of competitive games for much of the season plays out if the game is tight in the fourth quarter. That'll be interesting. That was a big question mark about Notre Dame going into the playoffs last year. And then we saw what they did late against Georgia and late against Penn State. So it doesn't always mean anything. But all of that leads to number 3, and you're transitioning right into that perfectly, Sean, is number 3 is the ability to make key stops. And those aren't just in the fourth quarter. Key stops can sometimes be when there's 3.5 minutes left in the second quarter in a tie ball game or a game that you're down 3 points. I think back to, again, Notre Dame. This is an area where I think Notre Dame was a lot better in this area last year than they were this year. And that's something that's got to be looked at. But I think to some of the games that Notre Dame had last year, some of the big stops that they made in the win over Texas A&M. Second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, I think of the big stops, USC's driving to try to tie it up. They pick it off, take it back to the house. You think of the big stops against Louisville. But sometimes it can be something as simple as you just kicked a field goal to make it a 6-3 ball game against Georgia. And you come back out and Georgia's going to try to go for it and go down and get some points, and you make a key stop, force a fumble, get the ball back, go punch it in the end zone. And next thing you know, with less than a minute left, it's 3-3. And then when the second half kicks off, it's 13-3. Doesn't happen without that stop. You think of the Miami game. Yeah, Notre Dame couldn't get the key stop at the end of the game when Miami went down and scored a field goal. But as you were saying earlier, and I completely agree with, don't ever obsess on the final failure or the final mistake, because it rarely leads to that. If Notre Dame just holds Miami to a field goal or holds Miami to a touchdown, or not even giving up a touchdown, just come up and force a punt on either the last drive of the second quarter or the first drive of the third quarter. Just keep them off the board in one of those two series, then Miami's got to go and score a touchdown in order to win that game at the end, which would have been a little bit harder. And so when you look at those things, Sean, those are key stops. That's what winning the Middle Eight is all about. That was something that Notre Dame did a great job of in 2024, but they dominated the Middle Eight. This year, they weren't as good as that. They weren't as good at that in some of their biggest games. And that's something that they're going to have to look at. Now, there were some teams that they played that they were able to, they're just so much better. And that's the difficulty, Sean, is they were just so much better than everybody they played this year that it was like you didn't really get challenged in that regard. But when we break this game down, Miami scored in the last touchdown. Texas A&M outscored Notre Dame 7-0 in the Middle Eight. Basically, Miami outscored Notre Dame basically 14-0 in the Middle Eight. You look at the touchdown they had at the end of the first half. They didn't score their first touchdown until 7:23 in the third quarter, but they started the drive during the Middle Eight. So you got outscored 21-0 from the end of the second quarter to basically the first third of the third quarter. You got outscored 21-0 in your losses. To me, that comes down to you weren't able to make stops in key moments defensively. And that's something that they're going to have to correct next year if this team is going to kind of take that next big step and say, hey, we're going to dominate. Notre Dame beat Georgia by 13 last year, Sean.
Yeah.
They outscored Georgia. And if you look at the last 2 minutes of the first half and the first 2 minutes of the second half, this is astounding. Notre Dame outscored Georgia 17-0 in the last minute of the second quarter and the first minute of the third quarter. 17-0. That means for the other 58 minutes, Georgia technically outscored Notre Dame. I don't put a ton of stock into that because Notre Dame did that, they were more conservative in the second half. They were more concerned about running clock than they were necessarily hitting that big play to score. So, I mean, it's not, we would have won the game. Not necessarily. The point is, however, Notre Dame could focus on ball control, just moving the chains, getting key stops because they were so good in that middle eight, so to speak. But why was the middle eight so important? Because their defense made 2 stops in that time, and Georgia couldn't. They gave up a field goal drive, and then Notre Dame gets the fumble, and Georgia couldn't hold them to a field goal during that period of time. And so I think those are things. And then the second thing, and I think this is important, I don't think that having an elite quarterback is necessarily the ingredient here, because when we think elite, we think, pro prospect. But what we have seen the last 2 years is if you want to win a championship, you certainly need good, clutch, smart quarterback play. Dante Moore has had way more impressive throws in the postseason than Fernando Mendoza has had. But Dante Moore has also turned the ball over how many times in the postseason? Even going back to the JMU game, he had 2 turnovers. And is he going to, does he have more talent than Fernando Mendoza? Yep. But who was the more clutch quarterback in those games? And I would argue that the only reason, you could say, well, do you think that Trinidad Chambliss outplayed Carson Beck? I do, which is the only reason that game was even close, is because of the quarterback play. So I think the better your quarterback play is from making big throws, being clutch in big moments, protecting the football. This isn't like a, ground the clock. Fernando Mendoza, I believe, has yet to have a 200-yard game in the playoffs. I believe I'm accurate in saying that. I'm actually going to go look up the box score here again, or look up his stats again. Yeah, he has not. The last time he went over 200 yards in a game was against Ohio State. So, but he's been clutch. He's made the throws they've needed him to make, and in the playoffs, he's got 8 touchdowns and no picks. You need good quarterback play where your quarterback's making big throws, making smart decisions, not turning the ball over. Even something is like the Ohio State game. Miami desperately needs to move the chains. Carson Beck drops back and gets some pressure. In the past, he throws a ball up. It either gets picked or it's incomplete. What does he do? Tucks the ball, takes off running, put his shoulder down, runs over Ohio State guy, gets the first down. Do you remember a single throw John Elway made in Super Bowl 32 against the Packers? Probably not. Maybe the little slide throw to Howard Griffith where he caught it from behind him. He had the seam throw to Ed McCaffrey. But what do we all remember from that game? It's John Elway taking off running, the spin. It's making those clutch plays. John Elway actually didn't play very good that game. He went like 12 of 23, had 100-some yards. But he made the plays they needed to make. And that's what I'm referring to, Sean, here is you need clutch, disciplined quarterback play where your quarterback says, hey, I got to make about at least 4 or 5 plays in this game. It's not about my stats. No. It's about making those big plays in those big moments. And this is an area where Notre Dame didn't really ask CJ Carr to do that a ton this year. But I think what CJ showed me in the fourth quarter against Miami after his pick, you go look at what he showed me against Texas A&M in the fourth quarter of that game. That was the only 2 times we really saw CJ Carr in a competitive fourth quarter situation. I think he was pretty darn good. Those are his first 2 stops. But now he's got to prove that he can do it on the biggest stage. But that's certainly an ingredient that has been prominent each of the last 2 years. Riley Leonard didn't put up big passing numbers against Georgia, but man, did he make some money plays. Throws and runs against Georgia last year, Penn State last year, even Ohio State, to help them get back in that game. Against Indiana, the post route to Jordan Faison, the check downs that helped them move the chains on that 16-play drive. That's something that you need, and that's the thing of all these that I'm right now so far most confident that Notre Dame's going to have next year.
Yeah, can they get it? Like we said to start this segment, can they get it when it's needed in any way, shape, or form? Right? It was a blessing. We know it was a blessing to line up. It's almost like Notre Dame was like the college version of the tush push in the NFL. when they had Riley Leonard back there with Jeremiah Love. Like, what in the world do you do as a defense? Is he going to give it to Price? Is he going to give it to Love? Or is he just going to be that extra guy that we can't account for in the run game and there's nothing we can do about it? Like, literally, there was nothing you could do with Notre Dame third, fourth, and less than 3 yards. And they were going to get it. They were going to run it. The first drive against Ohio State was just like, yo, this is crazy. They're basically just telling Ohio State, we're coming right at you. There's nothing you can do about it. Now, you can't do that with Riley Leonard all night. And he had to hit some passes, which eventually he did hit in the second half. If he had done that a little bit more in the first half, and they had been more disciplined with penalties, Jadarian Price is probably out the backside, going for 30, 40 yards. Now you're cooking with grease, and you kind of break that little run, that little hot streak that Ohio State went on to kind of put the game at a distance that was kind of safe for them. But I just really believe that you said the quarterback play, but it's an interesting transition this year when you talk about that, Brian. It's a very interesting transition, I think, and what we've been talking about, when you talk about discipline, the instruction is going to be very important. I'm very interested in Gino Guidugli's input this year because, you know, his hands are not just taking off C.J. Carr now that we've seen that C.J. Carr can be a really good quarterback. No, there's more work to do. There's more work to do with him. And then Mike Denbrock, all right, if you indeed had to do things a certain way and call things a certain way because you had a young quarterback, I think you did a good job of pointing this out in one of the shows either yesterday or last week. Like, you can see the wear and tear of the season on a redshirt freshman as he got to the end of the season. His form, you know, aiming the ball a little bit, not reading things, not being able to see if my first guy is not open, I immediately go to my second option, and not being used to that because teams had film on him and they would jump that first. They would anticipate from the formation, jump where they knew CJ wanted to go. He didn't quite react the way he should have acted or reacted. And we both talked about it. We thought he would have taken a step if he had that time off to get healthy in between a playoff game from the end of the season, to get healthy and then recalibrate and look at how teams had come in him in the second half of the year.
Yeah.
We both believe he would have taken a step forward.
Yeah.
But
because
now
I know you
stretch it
talked
out.
about that on your show, and I know you heard us talk about that on the show yesterday. It's like he was wearing down physically and mentally late in the year, and that time off would have been, I think, very, very good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you just stretch it out to the full offseason now. Now he gets even more time. So this offense, we expect to make sure I'm very clear. I still believe Mike Denbrock wants to run the ball. It's going to be a balanced offense. We're not about to see Notre Dame throw the ball 65% of the time. That's not about to happen. But it is going to be a little bit more weight put on the shoulders of C.J. Carr and these wide receivers.
Yep.
And I'll say this because I will be echoing Malik is saying this. C.J. Carr needs his guy. Who is that? If I say Julian Sain, you automatically think about Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, right? So if we expect C.J. Carr to elevate his game, it's very important that he has signature guys in the wide receiver room come with him. And so this entire transition for him being that guy, giving that type of quarterback play to make plays when they're most important, because that's not really the weight of how many attempts, how many times is he throwing the ball. No, the weight is when we need it, I have to be the guy to make it happen, whether it's via with my legs, with my mind pre-snap, with the throw, the accuracy, the decision, what type of throw. I'm going to be the guy to make sure that it gets done, right? And he's not going to do it the way Riley Leonard did it because they're two totally different quarterbacks. But I do believe he is fully prepared and ready to do that for Notre Dame moving into 2026. I'm actually excited because I think this will be an offense unlike any other Notre Dame offense probably since 16. As far as the ability to really put the weight on the quarterback, it didn't work out that well, but coming into the season, Deshaun Kaiser was coming off of his redshirt freshman season. You saw potential, and you felt like coming off of that offseason, like, okay, he's going to take that next step. Unfortunately, no need to get into everything that happened in that season. But this is where Notre Dame is with that same potential to say, okay, this offense can kind of bloom. I see you looking at stats. I know
No. My wife texted me something. She said, sorry, it's not good. And my heart sunk because Sadie's been sick the last couple of days, and I know she was been talking to the vet. So, like, my mind went there. She was talking about the tea she made me. So my heart just sunk. So I was like, Sadie's been having some issues the last few days that I've been very worried about. So my heart just sunk a little bit. Sorry about that. Now, with the stats I was looking at earlier is I kind of feel like about with CJ, kind of like how I felt about Will Howard last year. Or not what I felt about him, what we saw from him. In the last 2 games of the year, Will Howard, Indiana and Michigan, where the offense didn't play well in either game. People forget Ohio State's offense didn't look very good against Indiana last year. Their defense annihilated Indiana last year. And their special teams had a punt return. That offense did not score 38 points. And in those 2 games, he averaged 188 passing yards and 6.4 passing yards per attempt. He was worn down. He was just not playing well. And then he goes into the postseason and just rips up his 4 opponents. Because I think that time off, like you said, to sit back, see how everybody's playing and things like that is just not gonna – it's just not going to fly. It's just not going to fly. So I think that's a big key. And I do think that's an area where I have a lot of confidence that Notre Dame will thrive there. Let's go to the last one, Sean. One thing that has been so obvious the last 2 years is the teams that play better in the trenches are going to win more often than not, barring multiple turnovers. What has fueled Miami and Indiana's runs? Is it their skill talent? Their Heisman Trophy quarterback hasn't thrown for 200 yards yet in a game. Is it their speed? Miami won a playoff game with Malachi Toney catching 5 passes for 16 yards in a game where the other team's star receiver caught 9 passes for over 150 yards, and they lost. What have they both done in the playoffs so far, Sean? What do they both do in November? They dominate in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Notre Dame last year beat Georgia in the trenches. They beat Indiana in the trenches. They got their butts kicked in the trenches in the first half against Penn State. We're down 10-0 or 10-3. They whooped Penn State in the second half in the trenches, and they won 27-24. First drive of the game, O-line playing great. Rest of the game, O-line very mediocre, and then they went from 7-0 lead to a loss. And I think those are things that you look at and say, line play on both sides has been absolutely a key ingredient. Now that you're in an era where you got to win 3-4 games to win it all, it matters a whole lot more. Because in the past, Sean, you could maybe play 2 games and maybe kind of luck your way into not having a matchup that makes you struggle there. Here, it's a big difference.
For me, it's going to come down to, and this is something that I was like, I'm going to put it in the atmosphere. I need this Notre Dame offensive and defensive line to become bullies in 2026. I just need them to consistently bully teams. And I'm not just talking about the teams that they should bully. I'm talking about bullying the teams that you sit there and say, I wonder if we can run the ball on their defensive front because they're really good. You find a way. And it's not so necessarily by the compilation of numbers, right? Like, you're not going to run the ball for 200 yards against, say, Miami's defensive front, right? But I guarantee you Cignetti has a number that he's talking about to his offensive line saying, look, if we get to 100, and we can control the down and distance, we're going to be
that's
good.
The part right there, Sean. It's about controlling. It's about controlling the tempo of the game. Mm-hmm. It's about controlling down and distance. It's about needing to make the plays that you need to make. You know, you've seen. I didn't think Mendoza played that great early against Bama. They dominated that game because they came out and ran the ball right down Alabama's throat. You know, you saw the same thing against Oregon. They just ran the ball right down Oregon's throat. And so even though they're a team that has a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, and don't get it twisted, I'm not taking shots at Fernando Mendoza right now. He's played good football. because he's only done what he's needed to do. But because they've in their 2 games, they're literally averaging 400 yards in their 2 playoff. I mean, they're 200 yards per game in their 2 playoff games, and he hasn't had to go put them on their shoulders. But even more importantly than the Indiana offensive line playing great, which has played great. Same with Miami. It's the D lines. And the one game where I didn't think the Miami D line played very well was the one game they gave up 27 points and almost lost the game. The worst Miami's played on the defensive line in the last month and a half was against Ole Miss, and that's the game that was the most competitive for them. But they absolutely whooped Texas A&M in the trenches. They absolutely whooped Ohio State in the trenches. And in the biggest moments of the game, their offensive line was able to step up and do what was needed for them to beat Ole Miss. Same thing last year. No, we talked about Notre Dame, Ohio State. Why was Ohio State able to beat Texas last year? Because they completely shut that offense down because their defensive line just couldn't be stopped. They completely ate up Oregon's offensive line. They completely ate up Tennessee's offensive line, and then they beat Notre Dame in the trenches. That's where it's at. I mean when the more games you got to win, the more important it is that you have great line play on both sides of the ball. That's been the most obvious thing from these playoff runs the last 2 years, especially this year.
Tempo. Let me tell you something. Charlie Weiss Jr. did a fantastic job of changing tempo, right? Early on, frustrating the Miami defensive line, getting the ball out of Chambliss' hands, and then mixing in the run. Because it would have been very interesting if Keywan Lacey doesn't tweak his hamstring on that 75-yard touchdown run. And he's healthy, and that would have been something else that they could have continued to use. It would have been very interesting because you could see once they got them frustrated, now you get the defensive lineman trying to figure out, I can't come around the edge as fast. I need to find a way to get to them quicker. And now you're changing up their pass rush. You're making them think as pass rushers across the board. Now you can go to giving more time to your quarterback for developing routes. And then that's when you really saw them go to the tight end, especially on the corner routes, because they knew that was their weakness. Because we saw Eli Raridan have great effect on that same Miami defense in the second half. They had a couple of blown coverages on him. So obviously that's something that they saw on tape that, they struggle. They're great. The linebackers are great being aggressive, coming downhill to stop the run and support that defensive line that's coming upfield for the pass rush. But you can get behind them in coverage. And so those are the things from a tempo standpoint of knowing when to attack, when to save this call, when to get them aggressive or to slow them down. Charlie Weiss Jr. did a great job with his play calling, changing the tempo, shifting the tempo. When they got into the third quarter, into the second quarter, you saw them go up tempo. They didn't do it early on, but they went to it at certain times to kind of tire the defensive line out. They did a great job. So it's going to be interesting to see. I would love to see Notre Dame go a little bit more up tempo next year. I would love it. You don't have to use it the entirety of the game, but know when to pick your spots.
And Sean, when they were hot on offense in September, they were pushing the tempo. Like that absolutely was something, not all the time, but it was absolutely a part of what they were doing. And that's something I wish they would I hope that's part of their analysis this offseason, when they look at their team, that they put some more thought into, boy, when we were really cooking on offense, we were more willing to push the tempo and really take it to people. I think that's something that they gotta focus on more.
Because I think when you do that, and you have the ability to run and pass out of formations, you really put coordinators and defenses on their heels. You really do. And then when you have a talent, when you do have a running quarterback, it just accentuates that even more. It just makes it even more frustrating because you have no clue what's going on. So CJ, I think CJ is going to become an even better athlete as he goes on. You'll see him know how to pick his spots with his legs. You're gonna see
that's
all
the
of that.
key.
You're
It's
gonna
not
see
that
all of that.
what yours. Let me make sure I think I know what you're saying, and I think we agree. But I just want to make sure I don't assume. When you say he's not going to become a better athlete, it's more about what are you saying? Like it's going to be
No,
about
I
him
think
doing a better job of
he's going to
using his athleticism as a player.
he's going to become quicker up
Right.
here, which is going to make
Right.
him faster
On what to do with the football.
Yes.
Exactly.
And he's going to see it. Carson Beck isn't the greatest athlete, but he knows and has learned because Shannon Dawson has stayed on top of him. Know when to pick your spots.
Right.
Know when you have the opportunity to take off and go. And yeah, I think he's going to put in the work in the offseason. He might get a tenth of a second faster. I mean, that's what you put in the work physically in the offseason to do. But I think just overall, his maturation and how he starts to become better at processing it, like he's already putting it, he already puts in the work. His work ethic is there. But you still have to see it. You still have to see it. Seeing it in the film room, talking about it, and then actually seeing it on the field at the speed that you're seeing it, which is totally different. That's when your mind has to catch up. And you have to be able to process it on the go. And then there's one word that sticks out for me in this entire process. I think there has to be a different level of trust. I think that's what's about to happen. I don't know what you think about this. I watch the Here Come the Irish. And I look at that decision that Marcus Freeman had to make. And I look at him when he went before the team. Brian, I'm going to be honest. It was obvious as I looked at the players that some of the players had like kind of a shocked look. Because I'm sure some of the players thought it should have gone one way, and some of the players thought it should have gone another way, right? So when you have that type of competition, you don't have the trust in a guy that you need, the level of trust. I think there's going to be a different level of trust in CJ Carr. You know what it is. Dude, you're standing on the sideline. What do you think the Denver Broncos thought when John Elway walked out on the field 98 yards away in Cleveland?
You got this.
Watch this.
One of the great stories is that their center, I think his name is Keith Bishop, looks at John Elway and the joke in the huddle was, "We got him right where we want him."
Yep.
You know, there's the great story of when the second Niners Bengals Super Bowl in '88. Where it's a very key drive, and they get to the huddle, and Joe Montana said, "Hey, isn't that John Candy?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's that poise of, "Hey, man, we got 16 back there, or we got 7 back here."
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And you'll hear. I mean, Shannon Sharp has said. I think this was talked about in his thing. Which, by the way, Sean, thanks for telling me about that because that was great. I usually don't listen to Shannon Sharp, but when John Elway's on there, I'm gonna have to listen to it. But it's one of those things where when you've got that guy back there, players will say this all the time. Like we get out on the field and we're like, we're good.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's the same thing in basketball. It's like late in the game, you got a shot to win. You just assume that, you just assume that, that they're gonna get it done.
We're gonna get it done.
And so there's a level of confidence that everybody else has to do their job.
Yes.
Because you believe that 7's going to do his, or 16 is going to do his, or 12 is going to do his, or 18 is going to do his, right?
Yeah.
And I think Notre Dame has a quarterback like that. I hope we don't have to learn that too much. Like I hope we don't get to see that very often next year because, like John Elway said one time, well, part of the reason I had to have so many fourth quarter comebacks is because we were losing so many times. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to necessarily – have that, but it's good to know that you do have that when it matters.
But I think that level of trust, I think now impacts Mike Denbrock. I think it really impacts Mike Denbrock in this offseason and how this offense is going to start to be developed starting in the spring. I think, okay, now I know, right? But then it goes to, like you said, that trust has to be there in the offensive line. Like you come out needing a touchdown or a drive to win the game, CJ has to trust. Like, I shouldn't have to worry about looking down. I need to trust that these tackles are going to protect me. I have to trust that this offensive line is going to protect me, right? Because that's the thing about those moments. The defense knows you're not running the ball. We know what you're doing. The good ones can say, or the good teams can say, yeah, we're passing, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're coming. And so I think for me, I think this full off season, his maturation, I think during the spring, you're going to see that trust built amongst the team collectively. Because it's not just the offense that feels that way. The defense is standing on the side of the field like, yo, if we get a stop,
but this goes back to what our last point was, right? We kind of circled around CJ a little bit because that's where the conversation went. But I want to bring it back to the point is, I don't care how good CJ Carr is.
Yeah, exactly.
And Sean, I went into that. I mean, seriously, in his first start, when Notre Dame got the ball back with a minute something left, I literally sat there and thought they're going to win this football game. Because like they couldn't stop CJ in the third and fourth quarter. I mean, he was just showing such poise. Why'd they lose that game? Because their offensive line got embarrassed on that final drive. Embarrassed. And I still say that's what it boils down to. It's how are you able to make those big stops when the game is on the line? I mean, we all remember, older folks like myself, like you, we remember that final drive for the Broncos where TD runs it in and Elway hits Howard Griffith and he makes that backhanded catch and makes that run and Ed McCaffrey, lights out. We all remember that, but that's not what won the game. What won the game was on the next drive. They get him to fourth down and John Mobley steps in front of a Brett Favre pass because he was pressured and knocks it down because the Broncos got pressure on him. I mean, you still have to be able to have those moments on both sides of the ball. And I don't care how good your quarterback is. If your offensive line can't protect for him, if your offensive line can't open running lanes for him to be able to take some of the pressure off him, you're going to score a lot of points. You're not going to win a championship. Notre Dame just had, not even my opinion, the best scoring offense they've had since 1913. I'm pretty sure there's no one alive that watched that 1913 Notre Dame football team because then they'd be older than 113, or 112. I like to joke, like Newt Rockne was a player on the team that scored the more points than what Notre Dame scored. And I think it was 1913. Now that I'm thinking about it, I was like, was it 1918? But and the reason they scored that many points that year, Sean, is because is that the team? Let me see here. Or was it 1918? Let me go look at that. Might have been 1918. But if I remember correctly, the team that had that scoring average was one that scored like 100 points in a game, something crazy like that, and so was it 1912? Let me find it. They scored 100 points in a game. That's basically what I remember. Let me find the year that it was. Here, Sean. See, I keep saying 1913, and now I'm looking at their stats, and that's not the year that it was. It was actually earlier than that, but I can't find it. But the moral of the story is Notre Dame by Notre Dame. So it was 142. That's not it. Yeah. So maybe that was the year that they did it. 1905. Notre Dame football stats. But they scored 100 points in a game the year that they set whatever that record was. And that's what the point is. So anyway, 1932. Somebody said 1932. Was that it? Let me go check. 1932 football stats for Notre Dame. So, no, that ain't it either. Okay, I'm not going to keep looking for this, Sean, because we got other things to do in this show. But
just to go back,
to the fact is, I'm going back to all these great years, and I can't find the last time that Notre Dame scored more points in the game than they did in 2025. And where was Notre Dame when the playoffs started?
Yeah.
They were sitting at home.
Yeah.
And that's my whole point, Sean, is you can have a team that can score, but in the biggest moments this season, Notre Dame either the offensive line or the defensive line faltered in the fourth quarter in key situations, which I just think just wrapped up and did not show proper discipline. I just wrapped up like 4 of the 5 things we talked about that kept them from.
I can tell you from go watch the Notre Dame game, watch the Texas A&M game, and watch the Ole Miss game. 3 games that came down to the fourth quarter for Miami. The key drive in the fourth quarter, they all started the drive with the same play with Mark Fletcher. Exactly. That's their go-to. When things get tight, this is our go-to play to start a drive. We trust it. We worked on it all off season for this moment. This is our play. They know it's coming. We're just going to execute it. And literally, they have gotten big time yardage on that play to start drives when they needed it. And so we talked about it briefly, I think yesterday. Like Notre Dame had that in short yardage. They had that in certain situations in 2024, not so much last year, right? So what is that going to be for Notre Dame in 2025? And that is very dependent, in my opinion, on the offensive line. The offensive line is going to have a lot to do with that, right? Because the 2 big boys on that right side from Miami is the reason. We talked about what we foresee possibly on the right side of the offensive line for Notre Dame. Can that be the same type of effect for Notre Dame? Like, okay, we have these 2 guys at right guard and right tackle. That's where we're going. And it's absolutely nothing you could do about it. Yep. Absolutely nothing, right? And so that's that bully ball. That's that when things get tough, it's no secret. Miami just wants to start bullying you. That's what they want to do. When the game is in the balance, all right, let's bully.
Because how did their playoffs begin, Sean? Them trying to drop back, throw the ball around, make plays, and A&M shut them down. It wasn't until the fourth quarter that they were like, look, man, let's try this. And now what's smart about what Shannon Dawson done is he's ridden that since then. And
he got a little cute. What was that against Ole Miss when he started going to the Tony and the Wildcat and short yardage situations? It's like
he's still trying to run the ball there. At least
he's trying to run the ball, but just
if you're going to make a mistake because you're trying to find more ways to get your dude the ball because teams are trying to take him out, I get it. But at the end of the day, that stuff works better when your offensive line's playing great. But like Notre Dame tried that mess against A&M, putting Jeremiah Love in Wildcat, and it's like I understand what you're trying to do, but you're overthinking it a little bit.
You know why? Because I don't know about you. I predicted that Tony would have a good game against Ole Miss, but they just didn't have the athletes. Texas A&M and Ohio State.
Nor do they have the defensive system.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, they had the athletes to key on him and take him away.
Right.
I was like, Ole Miss doesn't have that. Indiana, I think they can do some of the same things. So it's going to be and Shannon Dawson is going to be very key. His discipline as a play caller is going to be very key in this game. But I think Notre Dame has a chance on the offensive line can the right side be Quentin Nelson and McGlinchey like? For Notre Dame as a combination.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting to see. Because if they are, and they give Notre Dame that type of go-to mentality and that way of escape, per se, if you will, in tough situations, and then you talk about the weapons that they are garnering at the wide receiver position and the maturation and elevation of CJ. Ladies and gentlemen, the running game isn't going anywhere. I know they lost 2 elite running backs, but
here's the deal, Sean. I do think there's another level the defensive line can get to.
Agreed. Agreed.
But they did not play in the playoffs because of their defensive line. I will contend until, the day that I'm no longer taking breath, that the defensive line was not put in position to make plays against Texas A&M because of the way that they play defense. I would also argue that once the moment the defensive line was allowed to do that, then they took over games and they dominated. And no, they did not play great teams in this, last 8-9 games, but they did play some very good offenses, as we've talked about. USC, Arkansas, very good offenses. So, yes, there's another level they can get to, and hopefully, it's funny, the performance that the D-line had this year that people constantly nitpick, you think about that compared to what we saw from the D-line most of Brian Kelly's tenure. There were some exceptions, 2012, 2018, but by and large, we never saw Notre Dame defenses consistently play as well as they have the last 2 years up front.
Yeah.
So, yes, the job of Chris Partridge or Charlie Partridge is to take that to the next level and maybe not have as many, you got a lot of pressures, but I want to see more hits on the quarterback, whether they end with sacks or not.
Yeah.
More consistency week after week of being able to get pressure on the quarterback, things along those lines. When I look at where Notre Dame needs to get to, here's a simple fact that some people aren't going to want to hear. The Notre Dame offensive line has simply not been good enough to be a championship caliber football team since 2020. And in most cases, not even close to being good enough since 2020. And until that changes, that's going to be the thing that becomes the biggest question mark. Does it mean that they won't be good enough to win it all? Maybe not. But it is something it is something they're going to have to overcome or improve.
Yeah.
And that's the big key. And I'll repeat what I've said in other shows, Sean. Joe Rudolph ultimately holds the key to this Notre Dame football team in 2026. The job he does in putting his line together, coaching his line, getting them to play with the mindset, the attitude, the demeanor, the dog, the discipline of an elite line is going to be what ultimately determines this season. If you were to tell me CJ Carr has a good 2026, but the line is elite, I'm going to say the chances of them winning are better than if you're going to tell me CJ Carr is going to be unbelievable, but the offensive line is going to be kind of average. I'm going to say CJ Carr is probably going to break records, but his 3 worst games are going to be against like Miami, BYU, and a playoff game when they play somebody good. And that's not his fault. That's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
I get it. Injuries and, blah, blah, blah. There's always excuses. I understand that. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, you recruited these guys. You're in your 3rd year. You're going into your 4th year now as the O-line coach. You don't, now that Emil Wagner and Billy Schrouth are gone, you literally only have one guy on your entire roster that was coached by Harry Hiestand for even a second. Meaning it's now your line. You've had 23, 24, 25, and now 26 to develop this. And until you can fix that and say, okay, we're going to get the right people at the right spots. We're going to build our depth in a way to where we're not going to be able to use injuries as excuses anymore. And here's a thought, maybe don't do what you can to try to limit some of those injuries because, I can't tell you that there's anything Notre Dame could have done different to prevent Charles Jagasol's injury this year. But, boy, it is kind of weird that they just keep having injuries year after year. You got to figure that out. And so when I look at this team, Sean, that's really what it comes down to. How good can the offensive line perform this season? And I don't want to sit here and say that we know for a fact that, the offensive line is going to be great because we don't know if Charles Jagasaw is going to come back healthy. We don't know when Ashton Craig is going to be back. We don't know what Joe Rudolph is going to do with Where's Will Black going to play? Where's Anthony Knapp going to play? Where's Gerby Lambert going to play? Like, I don't even know who's going to play where right now.
Yeah.
I know what I want to happen. I also know what I think is going to happen. But those things are all going to be part of it. And Joe Rudolph has got to be willing to sit down and say, where have we been good? Let's continue those things. Where do we need to improve? Let's make sure we're making adjustments that don't involve just coaching a little bit harder that need to be fixed. And if I'm Joe Rudolph, I'm taking my O-line depth chart and I'm completely wiping the board with it. And I'm saying, what can we do now, starting from scratch with the personnel we have, who fits best where? Take all what this guy did last year, what that guy did last year, and say, hey, this is what we're going to be. Because Donovan Jackson was an elite left guard at Ohio State until he wasn't a left guard anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to move him out to left tackle because of injuries. And lo and behold, he did what he needed to do there instead of just kind of plugging that next guy in, right? I mean, I've talked about this. Barrett Jones at Alabama was a part of 3 national championship football teams as a starting offensive lineman, and he played a different position on all 3 of them. I mean, this is a guy, Sean, that you look at, and I pointed this out on the show a couple weeks ago. He wins the Outland Trophy in 2011 as, I believe, he was a left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So he wins the Outland Award in 2021 he was a unanimous All-American as a left tackle. Don't tell me that Anthony Knapp's played too well at left tackle to move him when I can point to a guy that was the Outland Trophy winning first team unanimous All-American left tackle at Alabama that moves to center in 2012 and wins the Remington Trophy. Why did they do that? Because they had DJ Fluker coming along. You know, they had Cyrus Kajando coming along. They had the talent to say, to get our best 5 on the field, we need to move Barrett to center. And that's what I think that Notre Dame needs to do with Anthony Knapp. And then say, okay, but what about Ashton Craig? What about Ashton Craig? He's not going to probably start the season healthy. Put him at guard. It's going to be easier to get him back into the lineup as a guard than it will be as a center. You don't want to be making a center change in the middle of the season. And so those are things I look at and say, if he's willing to wipe the slate and say, look, this is what we need to be on the O-line, what do I got to do to get us there? If he really has an open and honest heart-to-heart with himself this offseason, I do think Joe Rudolph has the chops to go out there and build an offensive line good enough for Notre Dame to win a championship. I do.
And that's
I just think there's some stubbornness there that's preventing him from doing what needs to be done. That's my thing. You've never heard me say fire Joe Rudolph. You've never heard me say he's a bad offensive line coach. I do, however, willing to say that he's got some stubbornness as a coach that is preventing him from taking that next step as an offensive line coach.
You just got me excited, my brother, because if that decision is made, it's going to be a heck of a battle at center.
Yeah.
It's going to be a heck of a, because they got 2 young dudes that have a lot of potential.
Sure. I just think Anthony Knapp can be an All-American center.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he can be a first-round draft pick at center. I think Anthony Knapp, who's did a really good job for Notre Dame last year, and he's been a very good run blocker since his freshman year. I mean, the best run block Notre Dame had all season was Anthony Knapp destroying, Mikhail Kamara on Jeremiah Love's 98-yard touchdown run.
Yeah.
And destroyed him.
Caved the end. Just caved.
I mean, destroyed him.
Yes.
And Cooper Flanagan had a pretty darn good block on that play too. So, but
I like
the point is,
go ahead.
He's athletic. He's quick. He's strong. He can move people, but he's 6'3.5", 6'4", with just not a great feel for. He's actually a long athlete. You've never heard me say I don't know if he's got the length to play tackle. I've never said that once in my life. I question that. Well, I shouldn't say. I had some of those questions in high school because you can't really see in his high school film how long is this guy, and then you find out he's got pretty good length. And then you see him at Notre Dame, and we see him up close and personal at camp. You're like, yeah, that guy's pretty long. But he's not comfortable on the edge. Never has been. Now he did a good job this year. Name me the big time pass rusher he went up against since the Texas A&M game. You know, and again, he could be a good he was a good left tackle last year. I think he should have gotten more postseason respect for the job he did last year. But I just think he can be special as a left tackle. And I think they're hindering his potential by not giving him more opportunities to move inside where I think his game is better suited. And we've seen it before. We've seen it with other players. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, I mean, we saw Alex Bars was a pretty darn good right tackle in 2016, and he ends up moving and becoming a pretty darn good, right guard in 2017 and 2018.
Yeah.
We saw Gerby Lambert spend all of his career at Notre Dame playing right tackle, a little bit of left tackle. There's an injury. He moves into guard, and by the end of the year, he was arguably their best offensive lineman, either him or Knapp by the end of the year. And so we've seen it even at Notre Dame. We've seen it. So I hope that Coach Rudolph is willing to do that. And that means, and what do you do with Gerby Lambert? You're going to bump him out to right tackle? You're just going to move him out to, just going to move Will Black over there. Or are you just going to slide Will Black in at left guard, and leave Knapp? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities to where if you have any combination of offensive line starters that includes Ashton Craig, Anthony Knapp, Charles Jagasol, Gerby Lambert, and Will Black's going to be a pretty darn good offensive line. Or Selvin Absher, someone who beats Will Black out, Selvin Absher, maybe a Matty Augustine, whatever. 5 guys, kind of, that are out there. You're going to have a chance to have a talented line, but it's not just about the 5 best players. It's about the 5 best players and an alignment of 5 guys that gives you the chance to have your best version of yourself.
Right.
And that's going to be the key.
Yeah.
So, final thoughts on this topic, Sean, before we go to the mailbag?
I think one of the things we will see is whether or not they can complement each other, right? As far as dominance. You talked about there's work to do. Without getting too technical with it, I think Charlie Partridge has a chance to be able to go ahead and go to work, implement his vision for that defensive line as it correlates to, and his relationship with Chris Ash should make it seamless to be able to go ahead, know the vision, coach it, and instruct it in a way that is going to be received, and so it can be a smooth transition and possibly open up certain things that I'm sure we've all talked about we would like to see on the defensive line. From a number standpoint, we have seen, which goes to Al Washington as he goes to linebacker, we have seen the decline, as the run game coordinator as well. We've seen the decline of the rush defense continually come down. It's something we saw it finally get under 100 yards. Can we keep it there? Can it become even more dominant? Like you said.
And it was legit that way, Sean. It wasn't because they played a bunch of teams that don't run the football, and that's not it. They played several very good rushing teams this year.
Yeah.
And completely shut down.
For that sake, like you said, on the offensive side of the ball, defensively, can you control the tempo? Can you control the down and yardage? Can you put teams in third and long, which puts your defensive backfield, which once again, or your back 7, which once again should be your strength? Can you allow them to let you go hunt and get after the quarterback? So, what we've talked about all goes to the same point when it comes to the trenches on both sides of the ball. And I look forward to seeing both of these coaches, Partridge and Joe Rudolph, be able to go ahead and accept the challenge and do what needs to be done, because the talent's there.
The Partridge hire, I thought, was a move that's not getting talked enough about because it happened during the portal season.
Yeah.
And it's been overshadowed. But that was a strong hire. And to your point, this is someone that has familiarity with, number one, not only Chris Ash, because they coached together at Wisconsin, but this is a guy that I know for a fact has been on campus at Notre Dame in recent years. Meaning like the last year or two. He has seen what Notre Dame has to offer. He knows what's in that room. He knows the potential of what's in that room. So he's not walking in blind as to, well, I don't know what I'm walking into. I don't think Chris Ash is coming back to Notre Dame just because his buddy wants him to come back. You know what I mean? Like, Sean, we may be friends, but you're like, hey, Brian, I want you to come, move here and take this, go from coaching the NFL to here because of this, this, and this, and just because we're friends. Like, yeah, I love you, man, and we're boys, and we'll always be friends, but I ain't doing that. And I believe Charlie Partridge, has kids that are still at home. I believe that still live at home. If you're making this kind of move, it's because you think it's something that's going to be a good situation for you. That's what all coaches have to do. That's what anybody has to do. Yes, is this the right job for me? Not for my buddy, but for me and my family. And I think a reason why this move happened, and this is just speculation on my part, based on some things I've been told about his opinion of Notre Dame and things in the past, is I think he knows what's kind of out there. I think he knows what he's going to be inheriting. And I think there's a reason why Notre Dame decided to go back after Armel Mukum, and that's really the only guy they've tried to reconvince to come back in the portal. I don't think it's all these things are coincidence. And so when a coach has familiarity with what's already there, it gives me more confidence, including the coordinator, gives me more confidence. And this is I believe there's a level of mutual professional respect between Charlie Partridge and Al Washington, because here's my big concern about Al Washington going to the linebackers and Charlie Partridge coming in theory, is it can be hard to listen to the voice of a new guy when your old guy who you might have liked is now right there. But because I believe, from what I've been told by some people, that there's a level of, like, I hold you in high regard, meaning Al Washington holds Charlie Partridge in high regard, that's going to make it a much easier transition for Charlie Partridge, because he's going to walk in the door. The linebackers coach who coached these kids last year supports this move, signs off on this move, thinks this is a great move. And your defensive coordinator believes that, believes in this guy, because you're not bringing him in if Chris Ash isn't on board with this move. So I think the transition for Charlie Partridge should be pretty smooth. And I think that's a big part of it too. And hopefully he's as good as you and I think he's going to be. And hopefully Joe Rudolph can finally be the coach that I think some people think he is. Because ultimately those are going to be the look, CJ Carr is going to be really good this year. They've got talent in the skill. I don't know that there's a team in the country with better just skill talent than Notre Dame has right now, even without Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. But the question is, right there, football, Sean, is in college football still about that. At the end of the day, it's still about that. I think scheme matters here, there, this, the other thing. But at the end of the day, I can scheme you only so far. My dudes better be able to put in work against your dudes. That's ultimately going to be the key. But I am very optimistic that the defensive line is going to continue to thrive. And I do think that, I think we will get some news soon-ish about maybe some other things that are trying to be done to bolster the defensive line. I don't think Notre Dame is done with Keon. Now that they got Keon and got Armel back, they're not done. They want to still get Francis Brewu. I feel good about where that one is, but there's also a couple other D tackles that are on Notre Dame's radar that they would like to get in as well. And they're trying to put in some work with as well. So they're not done. And I, here's a move that I think that I feel good about too. I believe, and we've talked about this, that Chris Burgess is going to move inside, and that's a decision that has not been getting talked about enough. I think that is something that is going to be a lot more impactful than people think. I also was told that Cole Mullins was a little bit kind of banged up late last year. That's why we didn't see him as much. There's a lot of excitement in the coaches' rooms from what I've been told about what he can bring to the table. So I think there's a lot more talent coming back than what people think. And that's why keeping Armel was so important. That's why finishing this thing off with Francis Brewu is going to be important. But they're not stopping there. They're definitely putting all their chips, they're putting all their chips to the center of the table with this 2026 football team. Because I think, and I don't think it's just because there's, maybe Freeman's not going to be back next year, Sean. I think it comes down because they believe that this team has a chance to win it all in 26. I think if Marcus Freeman signed a contract this offseason that said, I'm not going anywhere, I legally cannot leave Notre Dame for 10 years, I don't think what we'd see this offseason would be much different, if different at all. Because I think it's first and foremost about, I think this team can be special.
You have to maximize those windows that you get, right? Kirby maximized his window. Now he's trying to open another window at Georgia, right? Nick Saban definitely maximized his window. Marcus Freeman probably felt like, which is why, you build schedules out. The head coach works with the athletic director, and they build schedules and they have conversations. Okay, what's the team going to be like in this year? What's it going to be like in that year? Can have a tougher schedule in this year? And I think Marcus Freeman probably thought 2025 was going to be one of his best teams, right? And looking at it, like, yeah, I'm okay starting out with Miami and Texas A&M because I think we'll definitely be prepared and ready. And I think our quarterback room will have caught up by then, and we'll have a guy. And I think he set it up perfectly from a talent standpoint. They set it up, right? We could surmise, hypothetically, if Al Golden is the DC and they go into the offseason with Al Golden and keep the continuity, where things have been different, it's fun to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. But it's not a foregone conclusion. But, you just think about, he probably felt like there was going to be a 2 to 3 year window where he felt like they were going to be ready to go truly compete for a championship. And this is probably year 2 of that. I think they believed they were going to have a good team in 24. Not many people thought.
Yeah, they did.
Outside of Notre Dame, but 24, They thought that was the beginning of the window.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the window. So like 24,
I'll
25,
I'll say this, Sean. I'll say this. Because I don't want you to move on to your next great point, because I think this great point needs to be emphasized. I made a comment before 2024. I said that I think Notre Dame's going to win a championship in the next 3 years. I had that belief. But part of the reason that I was so confident in that is because for the first time in a long time, I was engaging with a Notre Dame coaching staff behind the scenes, mm-hmm. and a Notre Dame, operations people that felt the same way. There was no excusing like, well, I don't know about this. I don't know about that. I'm not sure if we can do this. I'm not sure we can do that. I'm not sure if we're good enough here. I'm not sure if we're good enough there. It was a group of guys that embraced like, no, I think we can, if we play our game, we can beat anybody. So when Marcus Freeman says, I'm not worried about the score. A couple of years ago, he said this. I think it was before 24. I don't worry about wins and losses. I worry about, did we play to a Notre Dame standard? And a lot of people got mad about that. And I said, what I think you guys are missing is that, could he have said it differently? I guess if people don't want to use critical thinking, like, do you really think the head football coach at Notre Dame doesn't care if they win or lose a game? Use your brain for 2 seconds. Get out of your feelings and use your brain. What he was saying, and I know this because these are things they were telling me behind the scenes, is what it means is if we play our game, we don't think anyone can beat us. So why worry about W's and L's when the focus should be on playing Notre Dame football, play to that standard? Because if we play to that standard, the W's take care of themselves. If we don't, then now the L's take care of themselves. And that's the point that he was making, is they believed that there was a window in front of them that has now been extended thanks to the 2026 recruiting class. I think you can now push it beyond 2026. But I think they really felt, and a big part of it was getting Riley and then having CJ coming in the wings is where a lot of that came from. But they also knew the kind of athletes they had in that 23 recruiting class. They knew once Drake's class became juniors and seniors, they had a chance to be pretty special, and they have. And that's why I think that they're kind of all in. It's not because this is Freeman's last year. It may be. It's more about because we think we are going to have what it takes. And so we're not going to be a portal pickup shy of being that team. And that's where I think we are. And if some guys, don't want to compete against the new guys who are coming in, we understand and we wish you all the best, but we're not going to not go get a guy that can help us in the receiver room because of how you might feel about it. And as long as you do that the right way as a coach, then I understand that, support that. It's no different than recruiting high school players.
Yeah, some of the toughest choices always come when you come in and you have to change the culture, or you're making that last step to do what needs to be done to win it all. Those are the two pivotal points that are filled and littered with the toughest decisions, right? Because you built this by saying we were going to have 1 A's and 1 B, and we're going to be recruiting based and all of this. We're not going to depend on the portal. That's what you began with. But then you get to a point where it's like, okay, if we really want to take that next step, we might have to do something a little bit different than what got us here. And those are tough decisions, right? Because you've recruited young men with this at the beginning as the mantra. And then you get to the point and say, hey, guys, we have to go a different way. But it was the same thing, right? It was a conversation he had at the beginning. He had to have the conversation with his quarterbacks that he had to say, look, we need to go to the portal. We're going to go to the portal. You guys might want to think about some things and what you might want to do. But in order for us to move forward in this particular room, we have to go to the portal, right? That's a tough conversation to have, but it's honest recognition about what needs to happen. And it's the same thing that's in operation even right now as the roster has been built out, that you still need to have those tough conversations that goes back to what he says, question everything. It's a few things that we feel like you question that too. While you're questioning that, make sure you question that. But, we see it in action, and I was shocked with just the underclassmen aspect of the transfer portal. Guys having 2 to 3 years of eligibility being accepted into Notre Dame. I don't even think people are talking about that enough. That is a huge investment by the administration. Like, whatever conversations have been had between Mike Martin, athletic director, Marcus Freeman, the assurances that the school needs from them to make sure that these things work. You have to tip your cap to the administration, not being stubborn and understanding, okay, maybe this is needed, and being in support of that. But you know why they're in support of that? Because of the guy that's at the helm and how they view him and the relationship there. Now you've softened them up to a point to where they say, okay, for you, we might be a little bit more willing to listen to you on this. Not throwing anybody else under the bus. I'm just saying relationships matter. How you view matters. The relationship with the administration and the staff matters. And everybody should be happy as a fan that Notre Dame has kind of stepped into that realm in 2026 to say, okay, we're going to start looking at kids that are not just grad, from certain institutions that line up with our curriculum, or the, graduate students. They've opened their arms and lengthened the tentacles a little bit. And hopefully we see the benefits from it.
Well, Sean, that's going to do it for part 1 of our show. We're going to actually call a little bit of an audible here for part 2 of our show. I cannot find my marker or my pen right now to write this down. But before we head on to part 2, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button. You see that little thumbs up button down there? I believe it's below me. Go ahead and hit that bad boy for us. We greatly appreciate that. And if you have not done so, definitely sign up for the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We have a lot going on there, a lot of conversation. But Sean, in part 2, we're going to get to some stuff about the team. But again, just before we get over there, if you're listening via podcast platform, we would greatly appreciate also that you leave us a 5-star review. And if you're a fan of the show, go ahead and let people know why you're a fan of the show on whatever podcast platform you listen to. It really helps. However, I don't know how it's done, Sean, but it helps the algorithm as well. And if you're not a subscriber, my dude right here has a podcast called Lucky Lefty. You can find that on podcast platforms. They are with the Believe. They're also you guys are still with Believe, right, Sean? So you're also one of our, the Believe family members. Mm-hmm. Check that out. Sean, obviously, Lucky Lefty would refer to Malik Zaire. Malik's my dude, but we all know who really makes Lucky Lefty go, right? It's my guy right here. Don't tell Malik I said that, though, all right? But obviously, thank you for joining us here on this segment of the Irish Breakdown Show, brought to you by our friends of FanDuel. Part 2 of the show today, Sean. There's been some things that have come out here during the show that I want to lead to another conversation that I just saw about an hour ago. Jalen Sneed put out a post on his Instagram page that said, "Leave no doubt, last ride," had a bunch of Notre Dame highlights. So obviously Jalen Sneed has announced his decision to return to Notre Dame in 2026. I was not expecting this going into the offseason. And Sean, I think this is evidence, there's a lot of freaking out about all the players that have left Notre Dame in this offseason. And I think the number is 18. And then transfer portal guys. And then you obviously had 4 guys go pro, which 3 of them we expected to be gone. Josh Burnham was obviously not expected. Everybody else was basically a rotation guy or a backup that wasn't even set to play. For all the angst about who left, and some of the guys that left, I'm not happy that Bodie Cahoon left. I wish he would have stayed here. But I also understand why he left. I understand why certain guys left. I think some guys were forced out and things that I don't agree with from the GM level. But at the end of the day, for the second straight offseason, the vast majority of the players who could have left and jumped in the portal for big money, they all stayed. And matter of fact, not a single player jumped in the portal for money and money only. Josh Burnham, I think, was probably not happy with the portal with the money he got, but it wasn't that that was the primary reason. I think if it was just about money, Josh Burnham stays. There were other reasons that I think Josh left and felt that was what's best for him. This is another offseason where when you watch people losing starters, how many Notre Dame – Jalen Sneed and Drake Bowen are the only 2 guys that have even said, I'm coming back. Everybody else has just kind of been assumed so far. Now, I do think there's going to be some additional players jumping in the portal, I think. I'm not telling you it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. But I don't think it's going to be any big names. It's what I believe to be true. And I think, Sean, that's a good sign for me. And again, we're not completely out of the water because the portal is still open for 3 more days that they can jump in. But I think Jalen Sneed making the decision to come back, it puts him in a situation where you kind of start to realize that we weren't sure if the Notre Dame players are going to handle this offseason the right way because there's always uncertainty when you're dealing with young people. But this is yet another example of I do think this team is locked in. Look, if CJ Carr's number 1 priority was let me go make mine, he'd have threatened to jump in the portal just to get a big payday. Sean, somebody offered Ty freaking Simpson $6.5 million. What do you think CJ Carr could get on the open market? What do you think Leonard Moore could get on the open market? You know what I mean? What do you think of Don Schuler and Tay Johnson and Drake Bowen and Boubacar Traore and Gerby Lambert could get on the open market? Jordan Faison could get on the open market. Because with Faison, he's like, hey, I want my football money and I want my lacrosse money. You know what I mean? I do think this tells us a little something about it. And Jalen Sneed knows he's not walking back to be guaranteed a starting spot where he's going to get X number of reps. He knows he's going to be part of the rotation. Jalen Sneed could have absolutely gone somewhere else and gotten more snaps than he knows he's going to get next year. And when he is the guy that's kind of showing hey, man, we got something bigger at mine, I think that tells me something about this football team, Sean. That's my initial read on this. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it as we also talk about a couple other team things. But I think this, especially with KVA's injury, Kingston Viliama-Asa's injury, I think this is I think this is a big move. But it also is not just a big move practically. I think this move says something about where the heads and hearts are of the players. And at the end of the day, that's the one that truly matters. Because if the coaches are mad and they want to go out and win a title, but the players are like, whatever, then they're not going to win.
I'll just point out two things. I think it is a continuation of something we hoped, because we heard there had been a switch and the light had gone on for Jalen Snead with his work ethic and the things that he was doing last offseason. And we were excited to see how that would translate to the field. And we were happy about that, right? I tell people all the time, I was having a conversation about Keon Keeley, and I said, look, man, you can look and call someone a bust or be disappointed. But when you see what seems like a kid having 3 sacks to end the season like he did, and to get more snaps and get in the rotation, that's residue or the beginning of resilience. That you need to tip your cap to that young man. Because a lot of young men, they pout, they blame, they play victim. And so when you see young men go through struggles and they might not get to the point of your expectations or meeting the expectations that you had or that even the program had for them, a lot of kids tap out or use the transfer portal as an excuse to get away from facing the issues that are in front of them. So I think this decision is just further evidence of the growth and maturity from one Jalen Snead. And I think his best football is still right there in front of him. And I think he knows that. And I think in that, his decision shows a great appreciation for the entirety of what Notre Dame has done for him.
Yeah.
That maturity has come from being in a program and being surrounded by coaches and other great players that have helped and supported him, I'm sure, through his toughest times. And for that, when you know someone has been there for you and supported you during your toughest times, you grow a great affinity for those people and for said program. And I think that is his expression today. That's his expression. That's his belief. And I tip my cap to the young man. I do. I love stories of resilience and people overcoming obstacles and tough times and having to go through it and get it, right? Having to go through it and get it and having to recognize that it's not as easy as I possibly thought it was going to be. So great amount of respect for that young man. In the portal age, I thought, man, will we ever see those great stories of resilience of players, kind of later on in their Notre Dame career, reaching their full potential. And he has a chance. He has the chance to do that. He has a chance to do that. And I'm excited for him.
Well, it goes beyond that. I agree with your sentiment about the maturity we've seen from Jalen Smith last year, and sometimes Jalen Snead, and sometimes he can be a frustrating player because you see like stretches of him playing really well, and then stretches of him like, dude, what are you doing? And I thought he finished the year he played, I thought, really poorly against Navy, and I'm like, all right, that there was just no discipline. He wasn't sure what he was doing. And I'm like, this is Jalen Snead being Jalen Snead again. And what was interesting was that was followed by arguably the best 3-game stretch of his career. When you just look at kind of what he did. I mean, the Syracuse game is hard to tell what anybody did because it was such a blowout, but he was so good against Pitt and Stanford and especially Pitt. He was so good in that game. And you're like, that shows me a level of maturity as a football player, Sean, that we hadn't seen a whole lot of. But I want to talk. That's a great story, but there's also the practical aspect, Sean, is I didn't know that we were going to still have depth charts like this at a position like linebacker in the portal era. I mean, look, Matt Faramo, if he's like a lot of other stud freshmen around the country, is not willing to wait. And look, Notre Dame's benefited from that. Quincy Porter didn't want to wait one more year to, backing up Jeremiah Smith. Worked out well for Notre Dame. And look, if that's what kids want to do, that's what they want to do. But Matt Faramo saying, hey, I know I'm going to play. I may not be the starter yet, but I'm going to, if something happens to Drake, I will be. But there's going to be a role for me. Jalen Sneed, knowing he may not start this year, he might. I mean, he could beat out Jaden Osbury the offseason and Jaden Osbury, but I'm going to still play. I'm going to have an important role. You're going to have a 4-man linebacker rotation when the season starts. Put KVA's injury aside, Drake Bowen, Jaden Osbury, Jalen Sneed, and Mad Faramo at linebacker. And then eventually, Kingston Villiam-Moss is going to come back. But this is another important piece of this too, Sean. Jalen coming back and Madden staying and Jaden Osbury staying, which as of now, we believe all those things are going to be true, means you don't have to rush Kingston back. You can be patient with him, letting him get back. Because the big key for Kingston is get him back in time for the second half of the year to go through that late season November push and get him back for the playoffs. That's going to be the key. And there's a temptation to get a guy with his talent back soon as possible if you don't have the depth at the position. But now I think with Jalen coming back, with Madden staying, I think practically speaking, this is a huge boost for the linebacker room that I expect it to still remain outstanding. And I would say right now, I don't know of anybody, and again, I'll have to study rosters, but you're going to be hard pressed to find a team that's going to have the linebacker talent and depth of talent that Notre Dame and the experience that Notre Dame is going to have next year of everybody being in the system. A lot of like Texas just signed I think Anthony Hill's coming back next year, right? He didn't declare for the draft, did he? But they just went out and got Rasheem Biles. Well, that's a pretty darn good 1-2 punch. But one guy's new to the system. They haven't played together, and their depth isn't as good as Notre Dame's. You're going to be very hard-pressed to find a team that has the starting talent and the depth talent and the experience that Notre Dame is going to have at linebacker next year.
Anthony Hill has it for the NFL draft.
He did declare? Then there is no debate now at this point in time for me. Because I'm sitting there thinking if Anthony Hill comes back and they get Rasheem Biles, that's a pretty darn good 1-2 punch in the starting lineup, right?
Yeah.
But as people in the chat have pointed out, he did declare. Yeah. So I think that is big. And there's other guys you can point to, but I'm just talking about the guys that have played. I just don't know that there's going to be anybody that's going to have the depth of talent and experience and athleticism that Notre Dame's going to have a linebacker next year.
Yeah.
Which got me fired up.
And that's without KVA.
Like right. I'm saying even before he comes back, I'm just talking about Drake, Jaden Osbury, Jalen Sneed, and Madden Faramo.
Yeah.
Just that is
it's a boost. It's a boost. In my opinion, it's a boost for several reasons. I think personally, it shows things for Jalen Sneed as a unit, linebacker room. Also, you get a new linebacker coach. So now he has familiarity with guys, really doesn't have to do a lot, knows the plan. He's the run game coordinator, so he can coach it from that standpoint, definitely. Run game coordinator. There are some things as far as Chris Ash, what he wants as far as zone coverage and things of that nature that you would expect that they would get much better at. And so I'm sure they'll get coached up during the offseason. But yeah, I like it, man. I think the move signals, like you said, they're locked in. This team is locked in. Like it was no joke that they put that in the letter that they issued in the immediate aftermath of opting out the bowl game. Like that letter is like, that's our focus. We're already on 26, and they're locked in, right? So I think the fan base was wondering this time last week whether or not the general manager and the coaches were locked in as far as adding talent when they started seeing all the players jump into the portal and Notre Dame wasn't adding anyone. But
I think there's valid reason to be a little frustrated with the performance of the player personnel department in the portal. But at the end of the day, as I said last week, Sean, this is still Notre Dame, and this is still Marcus Freeman leading this program.
Yeah.
And
it's it really was would it be unfair? Because I think you talked about it. Some dotting of the I and crossing of the T's that didn't necessarily get done. However,
Just
in
poor
the
planning and being
in the
late to
midst of that, it was a blessing that it happened during this transfer portal, which has been unprecedented as far as the amount of talent, especially young freshman talent
and depth of talent at the two positions that they most wanted.
Absolutely.
In other years, they'd have no shot with a guy like Francis Brewer because there just weren't enough of good defensive tackles out there.
Right.
Same thing with Quincy Porter. I keep saying Quincy Porter. And
say,
potentially Mylan Graham. I don't know who the heck that is. Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham, if you're able to finish off with him, because there was Cam Coleman out there and Eric Singleton out there and all these other big name guys that it's like you're not going to, other teams aren't going to get in bidding wars for certain players because, well, if I'm not going to pay 1.5 for him when I can pay $750 for that kid who's not that much, you know what I mean? But he just having the experience, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I mean, it'd be nice to have Cam Coleman, but I'd much rather have Quincy Porter at a lower price with, less of a one and done mindset and go develop that.
Yeah.
So, and then spend that money on keeping Leonard Moore and keep, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, Texas signed some dudes, but they also lost some dudes.
Facts.
And it does give me some encouragement about what this team can be next year, Sean, and what the potential for this football team is. But I just hope that they can finalize some things here soon on the defensive side of the ball with the portal, because I can't wait to dive into the depth charts next week of this football team, because this is why I said, we got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? It's okay to say, boy, I do not like the way this process played out with the GM and some different things. And you drop the ball here, you drop the ball there. But we as fans have to stop being as emotional in the moment and then making an issue here into an issue that affects this, and this, when in reality it doesn't.
Right.
Let's just say hypothetically that the GM did the worst possible job imaginable without it being a complete disaster. That's hypothetically speaking, and I don't think it was that bad. Does that change the fact that you got CJ Carr at quarterback, or that you've got Faison and Greathouse and Lambert and Knapp and Jagasol and you know what I mean? And then on the defensive side of the ball, yeah, you had some missteps on how you recruited the defensive line, but you still have Boubacar and Bryce Young and and Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and Adon Schuler, Tay Johnson, Drake Bowen, Jay Nalsbury, Jalen Steed, Matt Framo, and on and on and on and on and on. And I just can't help but be, now that we've kind of got through the frustrating part of the portal and we're getting over the frustration of Notre Dame being left out of the playoffs and how everything went down in the bad PR, and we can sit back and look and say, boy, there's a lot of talent coming back to this football team. I'm watching other teams lose starters to the portal or future stars to the portal. And I think Notre Dame only lost really one of those. And you look at it and say, man,
well, there's something that rings true. And we've heard this saying probably with context that has nothing to do with football, but the way you get them is the way you have to keep them. The way you get them is the way you have to keep them. And so when you see schools like Texas, which goes to the heart of recruiting, what they put at the forefront, like Notre Dame, when Notre Dame recruits 4 for 40, your brother, all of that stuff, you're going to have to go through that in their presentation before you get a chance to sit down and talk NIL. When you have other programs that lead with NIL and lead with NFL draft and all of that stuff. Yeah, we can have that conversation, but this is what Notre Dame, you come here, this is what it's all about, right? So now when it comes to retaining guys, they know this is what it's all about. But if you sow NIL opportunity, NFL draft up front, then it's much easier for teams to come and get those same guys in the portal, because they can say, hey, you're not playing. We got an opportunity for you to play, and we got some money for you. Why? You sowed that seed. So you're going to have to deal with that in order to retain guys.
That's right.
Notre Dame is going about it a totally different way, but makes it a little bit easier to retain your freshmen. You've seen some leave recently, but for the most part, Notre Dame retains the vast majority of their recruiting class. And it's because of the way, they go about it in this landscape. They didn't take the bait like everybody else and just jump head first into this NIL pool. And, I've talked to several agents, Brian, and they're very honest. They're like, yo, we know if we have a young man, we know Notre Dame's not going to be the highest bidder. But you know what? They don't have to be. If they can just get to a certain point with my kid, they're going to be in position. They're going to be one of the top schools. And that's the agents already know that. Whether it's agents that are dealing with clients that are already in college football or they're in high school football, the agents across this nation already know what the standard is when it comes to Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that speaks volumes. And it goes to your point. Like, I'm just happy that Notre Dame, whatever conversations took place, I'm just happy they broke the cap or broke the seal on underclassmen. That for me,
that was huge. Getting if they're able to get Francis Brewu, and we'll just let that process play out a little bit, that's a true sophomore you just went out and landed. If they get Mylan Graham, and we'll see how that process lays out, that's a true sophomore. And I'll say this, if they don't get either of those two guys, it has nothing to do with admissions.
Right.
It would have to do with just, you're not able to get it done from a package standpoint and a recruiting pitch standpoint.
Yeah.
The fact that the administration is working with them in those regards. And they got Elijah Hughes last year, who was a true sophomore.
Yeah.
And like we're seeing this in the chat right here. And this is what kind of frustrates me is we always try to have people jump in these black and white conversations. And we've got someone in the chat saying like, oh, the staff wasn't in love with this portal class and who'd they really miss on? And I'm like, can we just not be that fan base, right? Can we be willing to say, hey, look, this was a problem. This was not good. You hear from agents about how Notre Dame was late to the game with certain players. You hear things about how they really wanted this defensive lineman, and then when he gets on campus, you find out we don't have his transcripts in yet. Mm-hmm. So admissions can't even make a decision, which then allowed other teams to jump in with more money, and then you lose them. You had a kid that wanted to come that the staff wanted, who was waiting for them to make a counter offer, and then 24 hours goes by and he hears nothing. So he just says, screw it. I'm just going to sign with this other team. Those things happened. Now, that, as I said, during the process, this is still Notre Dame. And there's still going to be guys that jump in, and those guys jumped in, and Notre Dame was able to make a move. I will say in some of these instances, some coaches got involved. There were guys that the recruiting staff wanted to go get that the coaches had to step in and say, nope, we're good there. And so we can say, hey, the process was flawed and still say, but it worked out in the end. And like I said last week, Sean, that doesn't mean if you win a game by turning the ball over 4 times, you don't say, hey, it worked out. Let's do that again. You say, boy, we're fortunate that this happened. Let's get better. I also think the people that then go on the opposite side of that and say, fire Mike Martin, need to be like, can we calm down with that a little bit? This is a guy that's learning. This is not the National Football League. You don't negotiate with college football free agents the same way you do with NFL free agents. You have to be prepared here, here, and here. You have to care more about cultural fit. Where in the NFL, it doesn't matter about cultural fit as much because it's just you're here to play football. And as long as you're buying into the football part of it, then we're no problem. That's not how it is in college football, especially at a place like Notre Dame. Those are all learning experiences they're going to have to learn from. But it's like saying, Notre Dame didn't really want to beat Marshall or Stanford in 2022. It's just Marcus Freeman felt that they needed to lose those games. They weren't really serious about those games anyway. It's like, no, he did screw up in those instances, but he's learned from it as a coach, and he's become better. And, hopefully Mike Martin will do that, next offseason. But it's still okay to say they kind of dropped the ball on this. But they're still Notre Dame, and there still were, something like over 5,000 players were in the portal. They got 4 of them so far.
Crazy.
There's a lot of players in there. Yeah. And it did finish well. But, and in my opinion, I think they kind of got lucky with a couple kids, because if they would have taken guys that they wanted, they wouldn't have guys now that they got. You know, I mean, that's the reality of it. So, you know, it's like, I'm not gonna, you know, it's like saying, well, USC knew all along that Pete Carroll was going to be a great coach. They just wanted to go through the process of getting rejected by 5 people before they got there. Yeah. Well, Bill Belichick was a genius. Okay, why do you say that? Well, look, I mean, found Tom Brady. Bill Belichick had no thought or concept that Tom Brady was going to become Tom Brady. And if he did, then he should be fired for waiting until the 6th round to go get him. Mike Shanahan did not think that Terrell Davis was going to become the greatest running back in all time at the Denver Broncos. If he did, he wouldn't have waited until the 6th round to draft him, and it wouldn't have been a special teams play in Tokyo that even allowed him to make the team as a rookie if they thought he was going to become that. Sometimes you can kind of, Rod Smith, undrafted free agent. Shannon Sharp, 7th round draft pick. Do you think the Broncos, when they drafted Shannon Sharp in the 7th round, were like, this guy's going to become one of the greatest tight ends ever playing in the National Football League? No.
He was honest in that interview that John Elway kept him. If it wasn't for John Elway,
right,
he might have been cut.
Right. So that's my whole point, is sometimes you don't do the right thing and it works out pretty well, you know? And that's my whole point, is it's okay to say, hey, this first go around in the portal was not a success for Mike Martin from a procedural standpoint, from a preparation standpoint. But at the end of the day, hopefully, if they finish with a couple guys, we're going to be able to look back and say, put the process aside and evaluate the players they brought in. And if they get the 2 kids, Sean, that we think that they're going to get, this is going to be a great portal class, in my opinion. But you don't mistake the end result for well, then we don't have to worry about the process being corrected. Because then you're taking the wrong lesson. You're taking the wrong lesson from this. And you know, like I said, you still have Marcus Freeman as your head football coach. And that's ultimately, and you're still Notre Dame, and you're still a hot program, and you still have plenty of money flowing into your program. And so celebrate the wins that they had, but then also be willing to say the process has got to get better next year. And then if they can do that, then shoot, man. Because here's the thing. Next year, you're most likely going to have a little bit more volume from the portal. Because if this football team is as good as we think it's going to be in 2026, you're going to lose a lot of starters next year. A lot of starters.
And I'll say this. I think there's another lesson to be learned, right? It talks about preparation, but I think it's evident the teams that jumped out, and I guess the word I would use is, or to describe it, they were more aggressive or more thirsty in the portal and couldn't wait, are the teams that are built on the portal. Indiana and Texas Tech jumped out there because they're portal programs right now.
And they needed to.
They have to, right? And I think the recognition, Mike Martin, the new guys that they've added, they need to recognize it might be a little different next year, like you said, because of what they might lose. But for the most part, we are a recruiting program. Yep. So we can be patient. If it stays like this,
that's true, but that's not what they did.
That's not what they did.
Right? Like, this whole notion of like, well, forward. They didn't do this. And I'm like, but they tried.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, that wasn't the strategy, wasn't to sit back and wait.
Yeah.
They had some things kind of fall into their lap a little bit.
Regardless of your approach, you need to be prepared before it begins. You need to be prepared, dotting your I's and crossing your T's before it begins. If you're going to go into it aggressively, you still need to be prepared. If you're going to go into it aggressive, but still patient and waiting to see what players filter in throughout the process to make sure that you get a chance to get the best players, you're afforded that in Notre Dame because you recruit. Like, yo, the last 2 recruiting classes, even if you lose, you're going to have talent in the cupboard. It might be young talent, but you're going to have talent in the cupboard, right?
Yep.
Your linebackers, that's going to look totally different than it's looked its previous 2-3 years, right?
It's kind of funny what you're saying right now, Sean, is because you're basically saying is your screw up allowed you to maybe go into next year's portal process with a little bit more of a different strategy. But at the end of the day, here's the deal. If there's a player you want, I don't care when he jumps in. I don't care if he jumps in on day 1 or jumps in later. You go get him. But no, you don't. You don't, to a point that's made. You don't overspend out of a need. You overspend because, like, hey, I'm willing to pay an extra $500,000 to get that guy because I think he can come here and be a game changer for us. You don't pay an extra $500,000 because we need this position and that guy plays that position, and we've got to get something done on day 2 of the portal. So yes, there are lessons to be learned, but that was their strategy. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this one. But at the end of the day, if they finish with the 2 guys we think they're going to finish with, and there's, like I said, there's another D lineman that they're trying to get on campus. And if they get him, it's going to end up being a grand slam home run.
Man.
Which is like, imagine what this class would have looked like if they actually had all their ducks in a row, at the very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you'll hear the spin from Notre Dame people. Oh, this was the strategy all along. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Yeah. But as long as you end up with the end of the day for the 2026 season, that's ultimately what matters.
Yeah.
And this team is still, and this is what Trevor and I are talking about. I just want this thing to be over with because then I want to know who's on the team.
Who's on the team.
Yeah. And we can start talking about this team because I am excited about what this team brings to the table. I really am.
Because once it's over, then your singular focus is on the spring.
Yeah. And I'm looking very much.
This is the depth chart. Now we get to see them. Hopefully we get to see them a little bit more this spring. And then you look into the game and recruiting starts heating up because you got people coming in to see practices. Mm-hmm. And that's when everything starts to really heat back up for fans.
And goodness, no more spring portal. Oh, God.
Yeah.
As much as I hate this portal, I hated the spring portal even more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Sean. So we're going to get to the mailbag next, folks, but we did want to have a little bit of a conversation about that here for a few minutes when we saw that news broke. We're going to get to the mailbag next, folks. But before we do, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate it. But as always, the place to be when you look at this, this Irish breakdown and all the different things that we do, the place to be is you can see it right down there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Sean, we are going to dive into our daily mailbag here at Irish Breakdown, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. And we're going to get into some questions here that people in the chat have left. And a lot of portal questions. One from Bobby S. Is Jalen Steed planning on returning to Notre Dame this season? Yes. Jalen has released that information. But we're going to go through this, Sean, and we're going to have some fun with it. And we will talk about let's go down here, and this is actually kind of funny. So, question from Aiden Banami. I see many IU Twitter accounts saying Miami fans have been so far the stupidest, worst, and vice versa. Funny to watch it unfold. I actually almost allowed myself to be drug into this yesterday, Sean. I saw some Miami clown talking about how bad Indiana fans are and how bad Notre Dame and Alabama fans are. And I almost jumped in and was like, the irony of this coming from a Miami person is just too rich. But I was like, you know what, bro? I'm staying out of it. But it has been funny to watch two of the dumbest. And look, every fan base has awesome people. Every fan base has bad people. But by and large, two of the dumbest fan bases that I've encountered go at it for this leading up to this championship game. It is actually very entertaining and just comical and also sad. Like, this is what our society is. Wonderful. This is great.
I think it's fun to watch, but I think it's just really a counterbalance, because you have the fan base that believes they're recapturing the old glory. And then you have it's almost like the old money versus the new money. Like you have this big gala and you have the old money in there that's been generationally wealthy. And then you have the new money that's flashy, right? And wants to stick out their chest. That's kind of like what you're watching, right? You're watching someone trying to recapture that's had the glory, has a rich history, that's been there, that's trying to recapture it and see it again. Then you have the new kids on the block, the new money, and they're flashy and they're talking big and we're the best team in the state of Indiana. And, and it's like, dude, focus on them. Don't focus. That's a task in front of you. Finish the deal, right? And it's the same thing for Miami. Why you work? Indiana's a tall task. Like, focus on them. May the best team win. Because after you win, no one's going to be talking about that. 2026, no one's going to be talking about who won it last year. But I will say this. Please, and I'm not rooting for anybody, but I would want nothing more than the defending national champions to come in the first week in November. I would love nothing more to have that as part of the story. Coming to South being the first Saturday in November. Please. I would love for the defending national champs to be coming in. I would love it.
I mean, it is a bit of a throwback to our childhood, Sean. I mean, that's what you and I grew up. Mm-hmm. I've pointed this out before. I mean, from 88 to 90, I don't even think this is debatable. The two best teams in college football were Notre Dame and Miami. I mean, you could really say from 88 to 91, you could make that case. I mean, there's the teams that popped up here and there. Florida State was pretty darn good. But, I mean, it was still about Notre Dame and Miami. And I mean, what was it? Notre Dame from 1988 to 1990. I think their last game was in 1990, right? Notre Dame beat Miami twice. Miami beat Notre Dame once. Notre Dame beat Miami when they were ranked number 1 and then ranked number 2. Miami beat Notre Dame when they were ranked number 1. Wouldn't it be nice if we could once again see a number 1 versus number 2 Miami game? But I honestly think that's possible from a pure ranking standpoint, even if Miami loses, because, they're going to have portal success again this year, and they're going to be a very highly regarded football team next year. And looking at Miami's schedule now, I'm actually just pulling it up now. They start off with Florida A&M, Central Michigan. They've got home games against Boston College, Duke, Florida State, Pitt, Virginia Tech. They have road games against Clemson, North Carolina, Stanford, Wake Forest. Other than that game at Clemson, depending on when that is, and I don't have a clue when that is, who on that schedule are they not supposed to beat handily before that November 7th game?
Talk about a soft schedule. Good gracious.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm so back and forth on who to root for, but honestly, I think probably Miami, just because I don't live around Miami people. And I remember how obnoxious Indiana fans were last year after they lost to Notre Dame. I can only imagine what they'd be like if they win.
Yeah.
But I'm very torn. It's like, I won't even give you analogies, but it's like when a bad country fights another bad country and I'm supposed to choose a side. How about I just none of the above? You know what I mean? So yeah, we'll see. All right, Sean, here. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think most fans would agree. Like, yeah, skip them. Let the Big Ten dominate so we get rid of the SEC. Most Notre Dame fans are like, skip Miami. That's probably the path most Notre Dame fans would go. Not even if they're rooting for Indiana per se, but if they had a preference, that probably would be it. That Indiana will win.
Yep. It's a question from Salty Virginia Peanuts. What are the remaining areas of need for Notre Dame in the transfer portal? They still need to officially land a defensive tackle. And I mean, Kicker. I mean, I think those are the two areas of need that are left. I don't think they need Mylan Graham. I think they want Mylan Graham. I think they need maybe some of his playmaking ability, Sean, but I don't think that it's like a second receiver isn't a need. So I think that's that's something that I don't know that I would call a need. It's a want, and that's okay. It's okay to go into the portal and get guys you want. It doesn't just have to be about need. So yeah, we don't need a second receiver, but have you seen this guy? You know what I mean? Like, he's pretty flipping good. That's kind of where I'm at.
That's a good position to be in, man. Where you're really like, yo, I don't think we can say no to this kid. And he wants to come. That's a great position to be in, whether it's recruiting or transfer portal. Like when you have fulfilled most of your needs, you really don't need a kid at a position, but a kid lets you know, like, man, I want to come on a visit. And you're like, what do you guys think? And everybody's looking around at each other like, what do you mean? What do we think? Like, yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, you pointed out the needs, but like Notre Dame's at a place where they're going to start to attract. Like, dude, two Alabama defensive linemen had interest in coming to Notre Dame for visits. I'm talking about the ones outside of Keon Keeley. That was already an existing relationship.
I still wonder if they actually were interested in Notre Dame or if their agent was using Notre Dame to drive up the price, knowing that Notre Dame is perceived to be desperate.
You know what? That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And Notre Dame kind of fell for it a little bit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. The GM did anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. Because that perception of, oh man, Alabama lineman, that's something we got to, you just got to do your homework, man. But I think even now, with someone they're possibly getting on campus, like, or might be trying to get on campus, is that somebody that you would have thought, oh man, a guy from that program?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. I definitely get what you're saying. My thing is, the reason I don't feel that way now is because Nick Saban's not the head football coach anymore. And I'm not as impressed with guys that Kalen DeBoer coaches visiting Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I totally get where you're coming from, but I just
and DeBoer's catching strays. That's
no, I mean, I'm high on Kalen DeBoer, but he's not Nick Saban. And I think Notre Dame's a better team than Alabama. I think Notre Dame has more talent than Alabama. So when Alabama has guys visit, I'm like, oh my gosh, they could get Alabama talent. I'm like, Alabama should be wanting Notre Dame talent. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean there aren't Alabama guys I would want. I mean, obviously, I'm excited about Keon coming over.
Yeah.
And hey, you have a shot to get Ryan Williams. Would you take him? Yeah, I'm going to go buy 2 extra jugs machines, and have him work on them every single day. But like,
lock them in there. Like, don't come out until you've caught 1,000 balls a day.
Right. Exactly. But I mean, it doesn't have that same effect for me. And especially those 2 particular players, I was like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's a comment that I want to respond to, Sean, from Irish Cubby. Thank you, Irish Cubby. I understand why people were getting worried, and I was slowly getting there myself, this transfer portal. But I think this is another notch on the belt of trust in Marcus Freeman that he will work things out. Response.
Yeah, you laid that out when we talked about it a little bit. It's still a program that is very much one of the hottest programs. The banner's been raised a little bit higher under Marcus Freeman. They're coming off a heater in recruiting, and they've already continued that heater in 27 recruiting. And thankfully, they were able to begin that hot streak in the transfer portal, right? After, a few missteps early. So, yeah, ultimately it does come back to that. It comes back to what Marcus Freeman has been able to build and how he's raised the perception and changed the perception in a lot of aspects of Notre Dame football.
My response, Sean, is I absolutely think Marcus Freeman has showed an ability to right the ship when things don't go well. Mm-hmm. Saw that with the defense last year. We've seen that in the past. My frustration is, I would like for him to start, be a little bit more proactive instead of reactive. Stay on top of guys more than waiting until things go bad to fix them. That's what I would like to see moving forward.
Yeah.
Jimmy James, 7891. Odds Notre Dame lands one of the big boys from Oregon in the portal. I don't know what the odds are. I know that they're definitely going after one of them for sure. I do think that they plan on getting him on campus this week. I don't want to say who it is because I don't know if that's public information. It may be out there now or not. I don't know, but I haven't been given the go-ahead to put it out there. And until I get the go ahead and put it out there, I'm not going to do so. But I do believe there's a guy. I said it in the chat, but I'm not going to put it like verbally out there,
right?
Because I'm not sure if that's something that they want being completely broadcast yet. It may be out there. Maybe it's been out there today. I haven't been on, X a whole lot today, but that's where I'm at. Richard Rhodes, do you guys think we need a running back transfer or roll with Aeneas, etc.?
They're fine at running back. They're fine at running back. Like we talked about, unless you just get a difference-making, surefire first-round pick type of talent that unexpectedly jumps in the portal and says, "Yo, I want to come to Notre Dame. Like, can I come in for a visit?" And you sit back. You have Aeneas. You have Kedron Young, who was really coming on last spring. They thought very highly of him. And the rest of the young, man, I absolutely love Brian. I can't wait, man. I think we might be in the same position that we were this past year in the running back room when we let these two freshmen come in and develop and get to their second, third year. This running back room could be once again viewed as one of the best the best running back room, and have one of the best duos in all of college football. That's a lot of promise. A lot of promise and upside in that running back room. So, no, running back room is fine.
I'm just not someone who cares as much about experience at running back. I don't. We've seen that happen a lot at Notre Dame. Kyron Williams went from a guy that had 4 carries in 2019 to 1,000 yards in 2020. We saw Dexter Williams go from 30 carries in 2017 to over, he would have been at 1,000 yards if he didn't miss 4 games. We saw Audric Estime go from, I think, 7 carries for 60-something yards to 900 the next year and then 1,300 the next year. I mean, I just don't care a lot about experience at running back. If you have the chops and you're physically able to handle the job, then you can play. I don't care if you're a freshman or a senior. I think the success of the running back room 100% relies on, does Kedron Young come back healthy and is he able to stay healthy? I think that's a big key to this whole thing. And I've seen people in the chat would you go after Justice Haynes in the portal? And I'm like, look, I think Justice Haynes is a heck of a player. I mean, we talked about how big of a pickup that was for Michigan last year. And until his injury, he was pretty darn good. But my answer would be no. No, I wouldn't. I'm good with what they have. Coach up the guys you got. That's where I'm at. Bisa hold from Paul Carney, question from Paul Carney. That's tomorrow's show. Where's Francis Brew on his decision? Don't these guys have to decide to get into school? No, I mean, guys have already kind of been admitted. They have to make their ultimate decision. I mean, most of these kids go in this window right now, they're getting admitted as they're going through the recruiting process to different schools. They're getting the academic stuff worked out, the schedule's made, and then it's just deciding, am I going to go here or not? I would expect decisions to be made soon, one way or the other, but it's not like if you miss the first couple of days of class, you're going to all of a sudden not be able to make it work. I mean, it's no different than a kid comes, into the semester and he's got the flu and has to miss a couple of days. That's
it's like the NFL version of veterans, just I don't want to come the first couple of days of OTA. He's what? Let me push my decision back to the end of the week, so I don't have to do the first week of classes. I'm not saying that's what's being done, but it is kind of reminiscent of that. Exactly. But Yeah, it was cool to see all of those guys moving in yesterday. The 26 club.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that class is going to be really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Aiden Benami says the Burnham departure still hurts. He had so much upside and talent and was hurt or never allowed to be truly unleashed. A shame. Always thought he was ready to break out. I don't disagree, Aiden. And I, again, Sean and I like to say, Trev and I like to say, really just IB likes to say, you can feel a certain way about something and still say, but they're going to be okay. Sean, like, yeah, I wish Josh Burnham was at Notre Dame, but they're going to still be okay. And getting Keon Keeley's part of that. But the biggest thing is you're bringing back Boubacar Traore and Bryce Young. Now, your margin for error is a lot thinner than it was last year, but I think they're still going to be okay. And if Josh wanted to be somewhere else, I understand. I respect the kid. I love Josh Burnham. I love his family. But clearly he was ready to move on. And I don't think Notre Dame handled the situation great, but it is what it is. Nothing I can do about it. I can say they'd be a really good football team with him. I just don't think him leaving means they still can't be a really good football team at that position. That's kind of where I'm at on it. Bobby S says of the expected transfers who will be here for spring ball, I believe all of them will be there for spring ball. Now, not all of them can play. I don't think Quincy Porter is going to be able to go through spring ball. I don't believe. Here's one for you, Sean, that I'll ask you. Should Notre Dame pursue the left tackle from Colorado who has just entered the portal, referring to Jordan Seaton, who has had some very strong words about players leaving Colorado and jumping in the portal the last year, and then, lo and behold, jumps in the portal?
No. I wouldn't have any interest. If he showed interest, I wouldn't be shocked, but I wouldn't have any interest. Just based upon the young talent you have. And yeah, I wouldn't have any interest. And I really didn't see the dominance that I would have liked to see from him, right? Because they were expecting him to come in as a youngster and really solve a lot of things from the left tackle position. And he was a little bit inconsistent.
Mm-hmm. He's talented, but the performance on the field has rarely been. And like, I understand if NFL draft people love the kid. I get all that. But Sean, when you watch the film is very inconsistent, as Sean said. The film does not support that of a guy that's worth $2.5 million. And I'd rather pay Will Black $300,000 to make sure he stays and let him play left tackle than Jordan Seaton. Notre Dame, there's a reason that not one single offensive lineman in the portal has been linked to Notre Dame. And I'm sorry, a college offensive lineman is not worth $2.5 million as a starting point. No. Hard pass on that one. Let's get to we have some super chats down here. Thank you for Tyler Evans. What do you think of Dylan Raiola transferring to Oregon and Sam Levitt transferring to LSU?
The Sam Levitt thing was a saga. It really was, right? You guys, it's a guy on TikTok called Ken Official with 2 N's. He's an LSU fan. His frustrations with the Sam Levitt saga. Like, we're taking him to basketball games. You've seen the women. You ate the food. We give you everything. Either you want to be here or you don't, right? And I guess Sam Levitt was because they signed 2 quarterbacks, right? They signed the kid from Mercer as well. Was it the kid from Mercer? I think they added 2.
Kid from Elon.
Elon, I'm sorry.
Kid from Mercer went to Oregon State.
Oregon State, yeah. So, yeah, I think that says a lot about Lane Kiffin. Just having this guy and staying with it and finally landing him. Dylan Raiola. If I were Dylan Raiola, the Oregon choice seems to be the right choice. Unfortunately, with Will Stein leaving, the development that you've seen from quarterbacks that went there and were able to sit and then eventually play and get better? Is it going to stay the same? But I get it. I get it. And I think is that a signal that I don't think I would think if he went to Oregon, he would have to have certain assurances. I just can't foresee Dylan Raiola going and sitting for a year. I think he knows that Dante Moore is probably more than likely going to go to the NFL, and it's his job.
Now, the reports were that he was willing to sit a year if he had to.
That's very mature.
I don't know how much I believe that.
Believe that, yeah.
I really
that would
Dante
be a total,
did it,
total 180.
Yeah, Dante did it, but Dante did it after his freshman year. And
Right.
Dylan Raiola been a 2-year starter. I just have a hard time believing that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a great move for Oregon, Sean, especially without Wolstein. I could be wrong. I'm just not a big Dylan Raiola fan. I've never been a big Dylan Raiola fan. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
I think people confuse his physical tools for great quarterback talent. And as we've seen from in the past, guys like Kyle Bowler and Jamarcus Shepard and guys like that, Jim Druckenmiller, just because you got big physical tools doesn't mean that you're a great player. I have a lot of questions about Dylan Raiola's leadership, his decision-making, his accuracy. He's just not a guy that blows me away as a football player. Never has been. And I'm not sold on that move. I'm also not super high on Sam Leavitt, but I will say this. Sam Leavitt made the absolute perfect decision for himself. A lot of simple reads, 1-2 throw, 1-2 backside, 1-2 check down, 1-2 scramble type of reads. I think he'll fit that offense really well. And they're going to have some talent around him for sure. So Sam Leavitt made a, smart decision. But look, there's a reason that Lane Kiffin went after a lot of other quarterbacks before taking Sam Leavitt. And I just, it just seemed like nobody was just dead, other than Tennessee, was dead set on getting Sam Leavitt. It was like that was their number one guy. I mean, it was always kind of like, well, we like him, but we'd prefer this guy. But yeah, I guess we'll take him. But sometimes, like I said, sometimes the process works out well. And I think that was the perfect fit for him. And just like I said, I got questions about both of those guys' leadership and decision-making and accuracy and leadership on and off the field. Got another super chat. We're going to do a show afterwards, after the portals close, where we're going to literally look at the quarterbacks because there was so much quarterback movement. There was some movement I like, some movement I didn't like. I also think it was smart of Lane Kiffin to bring in a second quarterback because we saw how well that worked for them last year. Bringing in this kid from Elon and letting him compete. Another super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. What do you think of Hollywood Smothers flipping his commitment from Alabama to Texas? And has the Alabama mystique worn off? I'll just answer the second part real quick, Sean, and then you can answer the first. In the eyes of players and fans, yeah, I think it has. In the eyes of the College Football Playoff Committee and ESPN, no, it is not. But Alabama doesn't have the same drawing power that they've had in the past. But they're not bums. I mean, they did just have like the number 2 high school recruiting class in the country. They're just not in the we're going to pick who we want mode anymore that they used to be. They got to work a little bit harder, but it's worn off, but it's still there to a degree. It's not gone. It's just not as strong as it used to be. Thoughts on the Hollywood Smothers flipping his commitment from Alabama to Texas?
It could be a lot of moving parts when it comes to the flip. I think originally when he went to Alabama, from what I heard, Hollywood Smothers had a short list of the teams he wanted to go to. And Alabama makes sense. But then all of a sudden, in the midst of him choosing Alabama, which he chose quite earlier than I thought he would take a little bit more time. He chooses Alabama, and then all of a sudden, it's just a lot of departures from the Texas running back room, right? So the urgency for Texas kind of stepped up. And for him to still be listening after making a commitment lets you feel, well, in the world, when we tell kids, like, in a recruit, or we advise, we can't tell them because we're not their parents, but our advice to young men is like, don't commit. If you're not sure, you don't have to commit early. Like there are 27 kids setting announcements like, in the month of January. Like, dude, take your unofficials, take your officials, commit in the summer. And so for me, if he was still listening, you have to ask yourself, was he really sold, or was it kind of like a rush decision, like an emotional decision? Like, oh man, Alabama wants me. I could be at Alabama. But yo, the young Hill kid at Alabama, I think he can be a really good running back. And there are some other good running backs that they have coming in. You go and you look at Texas and they come a calling, which just has just as much mystique and just an even better and highly regarded play caller, an offensive coordinator or offensive mind at the helm. Money is probably, if not a little bit better, very similar to what you got at Alabama. But I think the opportunity to play with Arch as a quarterback when you don't know who the quarterback is going to be at Alabama, I think there's a lot of moving parts
I think
that
the
made
fit
it
is a big
intriguing.
too, Sean. I thought Alabama was a great fit for Hollywood Smothers. My whole thing is don't freaking commit somewhere until you're ready to shut it down.
Until you're ready to shut it down.
Seriously. Don't just stop. Like the optics of it are bad. But my point is this. I thought Hollywood picking Alabama was a great move for Alabama. I thought he fit their system really well. He's the kind of back they need. Having said that, I think that Hollywood Smothers going to Texas is better for Hollywood Smothers. Because he's going to get to do all the pass game things that he wants to do, but they actually run the ball at Texas. And they don't run the football at Alabama. And I don't think that's changing.
Yeah.
I don't.
And they need a running back. Like they really need a running back.
Because CJ Baxter's gone, Trey Wisner's gone. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Super chat from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Thank you for that. I'm ecstatic to finally see Keon Drake and Adon all on the field together at once. Truly believe Keon will be having a breakout season. Slimming down 15 pounds should help the burst that he has already. Are you surprised Monroe Freeling NFL draft? I'm not going to lie. I did text somebody earlier today. I was like, I feel like the band's finally getting back together, Sean. You know, when you look at that, the role that Drake and Keon and Adon had as leaders of that 23 class. I mean, Drake was a leader, Adon was a leader, but nobody was more out there for Notre Dame. I mean, Keon's a big reason Drake even came to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I mean, Drake was. People forget this.
Drake Clemson, yeah.
Well, because he's not an Indiana kid. He lives in Indiana, but his family is not. You know, he doesn't have that same born and raised a Hoosier in the Hoosier State kind of guy. He was, Clemson was there. If Texas would have gotten involved early, that might have been tough. Auburn was there. And Keon was a big reason Drake picked Notre Dame. And I'm certainly glad he did because he's been a heck of a player and a great captain so far. But, Adon was that guy. I mean, that was like the cornerstones of that defensive class. And two of them have panned out to be as good as we thought they were going to be. I'll say it again. I think Keon Keeley made a mistake as a football player going to Alabama. And I think he made a mistake as a young man going to Alabama. But you know what? I also made a mistake and went to the wrong place coming out of high school and transferred. At the end of the day, it's not about how you finish. It's not about how you start. It's how you finish. And Keon's got a chance for a fresh start. And I really hope he takes full advantage of it on and off the field. Because to Charlie's point, if he puts in the work and Notre Dame can slim him down a little bit, Sean, when I pop into film, I still see flashes of the old Keon. I do. I think he was, and the biggest thing for me was he did not fit the defense. And it got worse when the new staff came in. He was even worse of a fit when the new staff came in. And that's why it just never made sense to me why he went there. Just never made sense to me. And last part, are you surprised Monroe Freeling went to the NFL draft? Honestly, I didn't put any thought into whether or not if he got the grade he wanted, then
he from what I read, he got that second round grade.
Yeah.
I think he improved over the previous year. He did.
He did.
And I think in his mind, same thing with Blake Fisher. Like, you go into a draft where it might not be as deep at your position, which could bump you up. And, you know, at this point, the money's so good in the NFL, is like, if you can go anywhere above the 4th round and get to that second contract and play well, and you're doing pretty good. You're doing pretty good. So it's not as like it used
Financially,
to be where,
I still think his game needs a lot more development. But I mean,
you know, we thought Blake Fisher needed more development, but
and he did.
You know,
he
did. But
he's still
done,
okay.
Yeah, he's
still
done
okay.
pretty good. Yeah, he's done pretty good. So I don't think anybody will mistake me. It really, when I saw that, you know what I'm about to mention, it made me think about a story during his recruitment when I saw that he was going to the NFL draft, and I was like, man, I wonder if that kid had landed at Notre Dame, like, what his career would have been like. Yeah.
Bobby S., what one player do you see taking the biggest jump from last year to this year? Mine is Madden Faremo. Can't see how he doesn't see the field much more. What say you, Sean?
Biggest jump?
Let's first
I think
include.
it's going to be one of the wide receivers. I won't say which one, but I do think it's going to be one of the wide receivers, right? Because the ones that are left in the room outside of Jordan Faison, they really haven't produced much, right? So I think it's going to be one of those guys outside of Jordan Faison in the wide receiver room that have the biggest jump. I mean, Faremo, dude, he flashed for me. I mean, I'm not about to be shocked or surprised when his production goes up because he gets more opportunity, right? I've seen it. I have yet to see. I just think it's going to. I'll take a shot at one of the wide receivers. Matt Faremo is a good one, though.
Yeah.
Aeneas would be easy, too.
I was going to go with Aeneas. I was going to go with one of the tight ends, just like either James or Cooper Flanagan.
Yeah.
I don't count Kedron because he didn't make it. There's no jump to make from. He was hurt.
Yeah.
I think Will Black's a guy that I have my eye on, maybe making a big jump from year 1 to year 2. Chris Burgess. And the reason why is opportunity is there for more, maybe more snaps than potentially Mad Frame. I think Armel Mookham's a guy that I have on my radar is making a big jump. I can see Bryce Young making a big jump as a player. So, yeah, there's a lot of potential options there. Of the incoming portal guys, I think the guy that has a chance to make the biggest jump is that's in the class right now is Quincy Porter. I think he had 4 catches last year. I think if he's healthy, he's got a shot to be a starter for Notre Dame this year. And it certainly would allow him to make a jump. Here's one, Sean, from Salty Virginia Peanuts. Why are so many high-value players from Colorado entering the portal?
That's a lot, man. It takes a lot physically to run a program, and you can't run a program when you're not around, right? Unfortunately, health issues. There's a lot going on, man. It's just a lot going on. I think that program, they would be, if I were the AD, I would be looking for the transition, because you got the initial bump that you wanted to get from Coach Prime. But yeah, I mean, it's an unstable situation, in my opinion, right now. It's just an unstable situation. But once again, it goes back to when you're going to have instability if you're building everything on the portal. If everything is being built on the portal, and if they don't do something this year, the possibility is they're going to have a very talented young quarterback probably jumping in the portal next year.
I think you when you build a team a certain way, Sean, you're gonna win that way and you're gonna lose that way. And the reality is Deion Sanders sold players on big, NIL deals, on a certain culture, playing for him. And the reality is, with the talking to some people, I think that the way his son was viewed and treated by him compared to other players, he lost the locker room a little bit, and that was not a team with a great culture. I mean, Jordan Seaton, who left, said that last year. So when you're building on your force of personality and NIL deals, but you're not really establishing a real culture, then this is what's going to happen. You're not going to have the buy-in. So, and then when the results on the field, like Sean, it's like with a lot of things, you put up with a lot of crap when you're winning. Whether it's being number 2, whether it's, a coach with a bad attitude, a player with a bad attitude. Like, look, man, I'll put up with your crap as long as you're throwing for 350 yards and not turning the ball over. You start turning the ball over and all of a sudden, I don't want to deal with your crappy attitude anymore. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's a reality. When you have an issue with a coach and you're winning, you'll kind of deal with that a little bit. When you are having an issue with a coach and you go 3-9 or 4-8, then you know what? Screw this. I'm going to go somewhere else and make a lot more money. I think that's a big part of it. Big part of it. You just don't see the buy-in. He has not been able to get the buy-in.
Yeah, D-line.
He's been able to get players to buy in,
right,
to get there, but not maintain that with an established culture once he's there.
Yeah. Defensive line coach ends up in Miami, and you see how that improved their defensive line this year. He leaves Colorado, goes to Miami. So, yeah.
Yep. All right, let's get to a few more questions here, Sean. Let's get to all right. Salty Virginia Peanuts says, if Notre Dame is still interested in taking a wide receiver from the portal, who should it be? Malcolm Simmons, J.C. Brown, Braden Pegan, Omarion Miller, and Perry Thompson. I don't know about Braden Pegan. I don't even know who that is. All the other guys have already made decisions. They're already committed to other places. There's one receiver that Notre Dame is looking at, and one receiver only, and that's Marlon Graham.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, there's a kid that we thought they should have recruited that I saw jump in the portal. I was like, oh man.
Who's that?
Cooper Perry.
Oh yeah.
He jumped in the portal. I was like, oh man, if only.
Yep. Here's an interesting question, Sean, from Salty. Given their apparent portal success to date, will IU be better next season than they are this season?
They lose a lot. I think from what I agree. The two big, I think they retained their safety. They retained.
Farrell announced the other day
he's coming back.
And I would imagine Pons comes back too.
Yes. That for me, keeping those guys that are linchpins in the program is going to be very important, especially when you have a lot of portal turnover. Very important. Yeah. And then the quarterback, man. I mean, Mendoza was better than O'Rourke. He just was. He's a better quarterback, and especially in those bigger moments. And so they got the kid from Hoover, right?
Josh Hoover, I'm very high on Josh Hoover, but I don't know that he's any better than Fernando Mendoza.
Right.
I also don't know that Nick Marsh is better than Elijah Surratt. And now if Omar Cooper comes back, then Omar Cooper becomes that dude, and Nick Marsh can be your number 2. And then you all still have
the Becker kid and EJ Williams, I think, still.
Right.
Yeah.
He might. Yeah. Does he have like a 6th year? Like he's been in college for a while.
Yeah, for a while.
He's had a lot of legitimate injuries.
Yeah.
Who comes back from their offensive line? Does anybody go pro early? I mean, they're going to lose Aiden Fisher. They're going to lose Mikael Kamara. I mean, they're going to lose some guys.
Yeah.
Who all comes back? And then who do they replace them with? Because they're still not done. They're still trying to get more portal guys.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. But my guess would be no, they won't be as good next year.
Yeah.
But if they're a 10-2 football team, they're not as good as they were this year. If they go 11-1 and make the playoffs and they're the 4 seed, they're not as good as they were this year.
Yeah.
The question is going to be, can they be as good or better? And that I have a hard time seeing.
Yeah.
And that's that's the nature of the beast. I mean, I think Georgia in 2022 wasn't as good as Georgia in 2021, but they still won a championship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Let's get to here's an interesting question, Sean, from Joe Mark. Do you think the Marcus Freeman September struggles are due to getting a false sense of security during camp going against each other?
I think I get what you're trying to ask or what you're trying to get at. I think honestly, man, I'll just simplify it, right? I said that they were going to get off to a slow start from what I saw or I felt, because I just felt like Riley Leonard missing the spring and coming into a new offense. And I just felt like it was going to take him a while to get things going. I just did. We can surmise other things, but I mean, just simply put, when your quarterback is coming in, he doesn't have the time. When your quarterback is going through a quarterback battle and doesn't have the time to prepare properly for his first start on the road in a hostile environment, he really has 2 weeks to kind of focus in on game plan and all that. That's tough. And this will be the first offseason where they have their guy from start to finish, participating from workouts through the spring, being there, practicing, and going into the fall camp to have great continuity, which gives you a better chance to have a better start to the season offensively. Now, defensively last year, I feel comfortable in saying if Al Golden was still the DC, the fall off wouldn't have been what it was from the first game to the second game. It just, first game, they still played better in spots, especially in the second half. What you saw in that second game, I don't think you see that if Al Golden's the defensive coordinator. So I think you have to give some credence to the switch in defensive coordinator being asked to do certain things, the scheme, and ultimately conversations taking place at a certain point in the season to kind of remedy that. But, those are the things that I look at when it comes to like continuity and hitting the ground running when you start a season.
Mm-hmm.
Could it be other things? But for me, those are like the simple things or the low-hanging fruit per se that you look at. And that's not to place blame or anything, but I mean, that's just cause and effect,
Mm-hmm. I think like this year, I think part of the problem was what we saw in the practices in the 2 weeks where we could go to practice from the defense was not what they did game plan wise going into Miami. And we saw them blitzing the offense nonstop. I mean, just heating the offense up. And then they started game planning for Miami and they went to something different. That's not even an opinion. That's just a fact of what we saw. That's been corroborated by us talking to people inside the program. I think there's mistakes like that. I don't think that. I think the issue in 2020, the issue has been different every year. I mean, what was the September struggle in 2024? You lost Northern Illinois. That came a week after you went on the road and beat Texas A&M by 10. You know what I mean? Like your September struggles in 2023 didn't happen until your 5th game of the year, which is week 5 of the season where you lost Ohio State. Like what from fall camp is why you lost Ohio State in week 5. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of reasons why. I just think that mentally, for whatever reason, this team is not completely locked in early in the season. And I think part of that, though, is the schedule. A lot of teams don't look great. I mean, folks, Notre Dame played better than Miami did in week 1. Like, can we be real about that? Notre Dame played better than Indiana did. If Notre Dame would have played Indiana in week 1, and both of those teams would have played the exact same way that they played in week 1, Notre Dame would have beat Indiana by 14 points. Indiana gave up 218 rushing yards to Old Dominion and only won 27-14. I watched that game. If they'd have played the exact same way that Notre Dame played against Miami, Notre Dame would have beat them by 2 touchdowns. A lot of teams didn't look great in their openers, but the difference is a lot of those teams were playing teams like Old Dominion in week 1. And, Sean, you can say whatever you want about this, that, and the other thing, but it takes a lot of people time to get their team going. How would Notre Dame have looked if they played Western Illinois in week 1, which is who Illinois played? Penn State played Nevada. Georgia played Marshall. Oregon played Montana State. Michigan played New Mexico. Florida played Long Island. Oklahoma played Illinois State. Texas A&M played UTSA. Indiana played Old Dominion. Ole Miss played Georgia State. Texas Tech played Arkansas Pine Bluff. A lot of teams looked a certain way to start this. I mean, think about it. The semifinal teams. It was Miami. It was Ole Miss. It was Indiana and Oregon. These are the opponents that those teams played in week 1. Miami's the only one that played anybody in week 1, and that was Notre Dame, obviously. Indiana played Old Dominion. Who did I just say that Georgia played? Was it Marshall? Marshall, and then Oregon played Montana State. So who you play early in the season also allows you to work through some of those kinks that you might have coming into a season with a brand new starting quarterback and a brand new defensive coordinator. I'm not making excuses. You got to figure it out, because Miami also had to play Notre Dame with a brand new quarterback and a brand new defensive coordinator.
You just said something that sparked the question and then your answer. The bigger question, to rephrase, if I were to rephrase this question, is why has it been a struggle the last 2 years with your team getting better after week 1? Like, why do you beat Texas A&M and then lose to Northern Illinois? Right? Why do you play a tough game against
worse
Miami?
Against A&M than it was against Miami? Yeah,
absolutely. Why do you play a tough game against Miami? To your point, but then your defensive effort gets worse. Like, why is there a regret? Because they said your second game, teams look much better in that second game. You see more growth, more jump.
You had a freaking bye.
Yes, that, Joe Mark 612. If you would dig into it from that standpoint, that's an even better, topic for discussion. Like, why? Like you said, Brian, everybody comes out the first week, especially if you play a good team. You're not going to look at your best. You're not going to hit the ground running, per se. But when you get a bye week and you come back with that performance, that's a bigger question for me. When you go to the second week and you come home and lose in Northern Illinois, now that's something we can really zero in on and say, yo, what's the problem after the first game where you can't get better and it takes you time to adjust?
Yep.
Here's a good one from Acupuncture. He says, which position group needs to show the most improvement this year for the team to reach its goals? Sean, I think that answer to that question is something that we discussed at the beginning in the first segment of the show, and I think it's the offensive line. Improvement, if every unit plays as well as it did last year, just the same exact way they did last year. Not better, not worse, just same exact way. But the offensive line makes a jump, then this football team does not lose a regular season game. That's it. I've said this consistently. The job that Joe Rudolph does is going to have a giant role in how good this team is. And that's not me saying that so that if things don't go well, I can blame Joe Rudolph, because that's me saying that. And while it's true that if things don't go well, I can then say that Joe Rudolph played a big role, but it's also saying if things go well, then Joe Rudolph's going to get a lot of praise. unless it's very obvious that the season we're out is like, okay, I underestimated how much CJ Carr and the defense can carry this football team. You know what I mean, Sean? Like, yeah, the O-line sucked, but CJ was just too good or whatever. Defense was too good and they could figure it out. Unless that's the case, I don't know that it will be. I think the offensive line is going to be the key. Here we go. Connor Fitch, do you think Freeman to the Steelers rumors have some legs to it? I don't think a lot of rumors that happen 5 minutes after a coach gets let go or retires or whatever else have any legs to it. I think a lot of that's speculation. We've said it before. I think Marcus Freeman has interest in coaching in the NFL. I do believe the Steelers are the type of place that would make a lot of sense for him. If that's what he wants to do. I have no idea if the Steelers have interest in Marcus Freeman. I don't have any idea if Marcus Freeman would go back on his word. He already said he's coming back in 2026. I've said it before, Sean. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person that is going to go back on his word. Listen, if the Steelers job is one he wants, you're telling me he didn't have an idea that this job might come open this offseason? I mean, at the time, he could have waited even less time, because the Steelers were a mess going down the stretch. I would be very disappointed if Marcus Freeman went back on his word to this football team for 2026 and took the Steelers job. So, but do I have knowledge that he won't take the job? No, I don't. I have no idea what Marcus Freeman's going to do. Maybe it's something that gets addressed tomorrow in the press conference, which is going to be at 1:00, which is why our show is going to start late tomorrow. But at the end of the day, Sean, I don't know what he's going to talk about tomorrow. We also hoped that Pete Bavacca was going to talk about A, B, C, and D when he called his press conference at the end of the season. I would imagine that this is going to be a press conference where Coach Freeman addresses the legal situation that came up. I would imagine there's going to be some conversations about, the portal class and things like that. But that's speculation. I have no idea.
His name is a hot name in NFL circles. So anytime you have one of the blue bloods or founding organizations, and he fits in with the Chuck Noll, Mike Tomlin persona. Like, he fits their type of head coach. Bill Cowher, he fits that. Cowher was
There's one big exception, right? One giant exception. He smiles.
Yeah. Yes. Those other guys did not smile. But no, he fits the persona. Tough-minded. Grew up in the region, Pennsylvania, Ohio region. So he gets it. He will understand, the people, the fan base. So yeah, I understand why the rumors have taken off the way they have, And then other fan bases just want to see Notre Dame, if he would leave, they just want to have an opportunity to pick at Notre Dame. So It is what it is.
Here's one from IGK, Irish Gordian Knot. As fans, we always wish for that number one recruiting class, and now that we have that, and likely a top 3 portal class, how much impact will the newcomers have on the success or failure of the team? I want to say this first. I don't know that I would count Notre Dame as having a top 3 portal class. I mean, they're going to have at the most 7 or 8 guys. I don't know how a team with 7 or 8 guys can have the number one portal class when there's people bringing in 20 plus guys. I just don't see how that's possible. Nor do I care. I don't ever want Notre Dame to rank in the top 5 of portal pickups, because that means they lost a lot. I may say that differently next year, but to answer the question though, Sean, I think the ultimate success of this football team in 2026 will be determined by the returners doing what they do, and then the newcomers filling the roles they were recruited to play. I don't think there's a single newcomer that is being brought in with the same expectations that a Malachi Fields had last year, that a Riley Leonard had in 24, a Sam Hartman had in 23, even a Bo Collins had in 24.
Yeah.
Because you have a Jordan Faison and a Jaden Greathouse at receiver. So you just want Quincy Porter to come in and learn and develop and grow into being that guy, but he doesn't have to be that in the same way that Malachi Fields needed to come in and be your guy the minute he stepped foot on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a little bit different, in my opinion, Sean. I think that's different than what we've seen in the past. So that's where I'm at on that one.
Yeah.
Thoughts? We'll wrap up with this one. Thoughts on that?
I was just looking up who they had as the top portal teams right now. Very similar, just programs that have to do it. So you're talking about Texas Tech, Indiana, Syracuse has been very quiet with what they've been doing. Fran Brown. It was funny because Fran Brown, in the aftermath of the loss to Notre Dame, said this is a program we would love to model.
Yeah, and emulate. Yeah.
And emulate. So to be honest, I didn't really think about it until you brought it up when we were talking in segment 2 or part 2 of today's show. But yeah, next year could be a heavy portal year or a much heavier portal year.
Could be
for Notre Dame, right?
Especially depending on how many of the freshmen and sophomores they're able to keep on the roster,
Yeah.
and who's ready to play in year 2.
Yeah.
I think that, Sean, I look at it and say there's a lot of guys being brought in from the portal to play important roles. I just think this is the first portal class that we've seen in a while where you don't need portal guys to be impact players or your team can't achieve its full potential.
Yeah.
If Malachi Fields didn't play to his potential, then this team was going to struggle. If Riley Leonard didn't play to his potential, that team was going to struggle to be a championship caliber team.
Yeah.
I don't think any of those guys have to be what Riley Leonard was in 2026. If they are, that's great.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. So, and then real quick, people are saying average rating. I don't care about average rating. When you bring in a smaller group, it's going to normally be a higher rating. And if they go get a kicker, that number 1 rating goes way down because they'll factor that in as well. So I don't really care a whole lot about that, to be honest with you. So anyway, that's going to do it for today's show. Sean, thanks for being with me today. I appreciate it as always, my man. We'll be back tomorrow. Little scheduling thing for tomorrow, folks. We will not go at 1:00. Notre Dame is going to have we got an email in the middle of the show. The media did, saying that they will have a 1:00 press conference tomorrow. I will want to be at that. I don't know what's going to be discussed. I would imagine it's going to talk about this is just my guess, the legal situation that happened and Marcus Freeman getting a chance to say his point of view. I would think that might be a topic of conversation. I believe that there'll probably be some portal questions that they'll answer and things like that. So I'm happy that they're having the press conference. I don't think it's going to be a thing. Somebody was like, could this be him committing to the program long term? I was like, I highly doubt it, but I can wish, wish upon a star, But I imagine those 2 topics will most likely be at the top of the conversation list. Again, just a guess on my part. So we'll see. So we'll do that at 1. I'll let you guys know what time we'll get started tomorrow. It'll probably be closer to like 3. What I'm probably going to do is we'll probably have a topical show tomorrow and then move Beisel Hold to Thursday because it'll be hard for us to have a good Beisel Hold when, we would have to run way over the 5:00 show. So a little bit of a scheduling change this week. So just keep that in mind. You can still keep putting Beisel Hold questions in the show, in the chat. Salty already started that at boards@irishbreakdown.com, and that's obviously for Notre Dame Irish Breakdown members only, so definitely check that out. But so we'll be back tomorrow, probably get started closer to 3:00. Freeman's going to have his press conference at 1. It'd probably be tough for me to get back by 2 to start a show at 2. So that's why you got to be not only subscribed to the channel, Sean, but you have to make sure that you have that notification bell on as well. So if we go live at 2:30 or 3, you'll know. I'll tweet it out. I'll put it on the board as well. So we'll probably start between 2:30 and 3:00 tomorrow, just to let people know kind of what the plan is there. So, and then we'll obviously talk about, what we learned from Coach Freeman's press conference. And then obviously we'll talk about hopefully any portal additions that come through. And then Thursday we'll have Beisel Hold. Friday we'll have mailbag. So that's going to be the show for the rest of the week. So for Sean, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. And we will talk to you again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.